Okay. Well, when you show up in the chat, say hi. Cause every time I start a live stream, feel really weird, like I'm talking to myself. Okay, that's playing. That's going. Okay, good. Okay, I had to take some medicine on an empty stomach, so I need to wait about 5 more minutes, and then I can eat. Oh, hi, Swanty. Thank you for saying hi. Now I know that I'm not here by myself. Um, my stomach's. I gotta eat soon. I'm waiting for this timer to run out, and then I can eat lunch. I have to take some medicine on an empty stomach. It just took me a while to get going today. It's Sunday. It's okay. I'm trying to find something interesting to put on while I eat lunch and do some job hunting. I'm thinking about another one of these guys. I like this guy's editing style and the man who faked human clothing. Okay. The twins who terrorized physicists with a sock puppet army. Well, that does sound interesting, but what else do we got? Let's see. Legendary drops. Oh, and a little bit later, Swanty, if you have to go anytime soon, well, let me know if you've got to go in like an hour or so, because I want to review the video essay. I want a couple of people to review it. I can read through it. You can give me your opinion on it. I sent it to a couple of friends. And now I'm kind of on the fence as to how much work should I put into it. And what I mean by that is like the graphics, right? Do I just post the screenshot in the video editor, or do I go get my graphics artist to make it like on a cork board and like looks like somebody pinned it there with a pen, and then the camera flies over and that kind of stuff, you know? So like how high are the production values going to be, basically? And I feel like this should be some of it should be there because I hope the Skyrim music video takes off, and then I want this other video to be there so people can see what it's all about. Because I very happily do video essays like that. Um, I'm trying to take a different tact instead of just there's plenty of content out there. People um, that already follow the industry. Oh, there's the food. Like there's people are making plenty of content out there that is following the industry and it is properly pointing out all of the bad things. But they're only pointing out the bad things and then going, be mad about it. It's almost well, not all of them, but there's some outrage farming and stuff like that. And I'm not trying to add to any of that. Whoop. I guess. I hope you're okay with that, Swanty. I can't be looking at this right now. I need to focus. Okay, let's eat first. Eat first. We'll watch the thing about the. Hold on.
Sorry, did I keep you waiting? Apologies for the hiatus, but we've had some new breakthroughs in the curious case of the Bog brothers. If you're just now joining us for the first time, part 1 is linked below, but to summarize, a pair of wealthy French twins managed to fake their way into PhDs by writing 5 nonsense physics papers. And for a while it looked like that was the end of the story. So how did we get to this? Well, it's actually a long story, so sit tight, relax, and let's pick up where we left off. The forum post that exposed the brothers was made in October of 2002, and it was quickly flooded with traffic. Within the first week, the brothers themselves even made an appearance.
This is what I'm talking about with like production values. That's why I really, really appreciate this guy's content, because it's not just like that's not just a picture of a calendar. He's put that. He made something in Blender and he rendered it and he made it go along with the script, and I just appreciate that. It's just next level. That's what it is.
By early November, the news outlets had picked up the story while the brothers continued to get dogpiled. After a while, though, the brothers had learned to stop posting public comments and had started privately emailing scientists to level the playing field. But after a while, the scientists got bored. It was like talking to a brick wall. Arguing with the brothers privately wasn't productive, and was far less interesting than seeing it play out in a public forum where people could spectate. For most of 2003, things remained quiet. At least that's what it seemed like at the time. In hindsight, the brothers were active behind the scenes, but for now, we'll skip forward to 2004. By that point, Igor and Grichka had a new show airing, Rayon X, and in June they had released a new book, Avant le Big Bang. Big Bang doesn't have a translation in French, it's just Big Bang. I find that very funny. This book adapted their thesis work into their signature pop style, full of mysticism and grand ideas. Most relevant to us, though, it's where they shared their perspective on the controversy. What is notable, however, are several quotes from critics which are suspiciously lacking in criticism. They almost come off as endorsements. Peter Voigt, for instance, had spoken with the brothers by opinion, and was surprised to find that part of their conversation had unknowingly made it into their book. Even more surprising was that the quote was more supportive than he remembered it being. His sentence, "It's certainly possible that you have some new worthwhile results on quantum groups," got translated into the following. Certainly possible became absolutely certain. A polite send-off had transformed into a glowing review. An innocent mistake? Maybe? But this wasn't an isolated incident. John D. Georges had a quote mistranslated as well. Incomprehensible articles cannot pass through such a procedure, and certainly not 5 times. Now, if I read that quote out of context, I'd assume he was defending their papers, as in, their papers had to have some value to make it through the review process. But his actual quote was, "Nonsense is not supposed to get through this process. Certainly not 5 times." It's a subtle difference.
I'm completely lost.
There. Cannot pass.
I feel like
and
there was another one before this. Okay, yeah, I think we were watching part 2.
You uploaded
Oui.
Dump it.
Submitting your first ever paper to a journal is one of the most nerve-wracking things you can do in any research field. Your work is going to be torn apart by your peers, but most likely it'll squeak by after a few heated rounds of revisions. By your 10th paper or so, these anxieties have been replaced by the mundane. It's just part of the job. In 1996, Alan Sokol was here, which is weird. See, Alan Sokol is 41 right now, a well-established professor with an interest in quantum field theory. And he's had close to 100 papers published since the 70s. But his newest paper was different. This one was going to be controversial, and he had to fight for it. The editors had requested changes, but Alan held his ground, insisting that his paper appear in its unaltered, intended form. Eventually, the editors gave in, and they published the paper in May 1996. The name of that paper? Transgressing the Boundaries Towards a Transformative Hermeneutics of Quantum Gravity. And at first glance, that doesn't reveal a whole lot. Sure, it's got a little dramatic flair to it, but is it that different from any of his previous work? Well, consider for a moment the journal he submitted it to. Social Text, a cultural studies and social science journal. Let's read a quote. Just as liberal feminists are frequently content with a minimal agenda of legal and social equality for women and pro-choice, some liberal and even some socialist mathematicians are often content to work within the hegemonic Zermelo-Fraenkel framework. See, this is a work of satire. It's a joke that you may or may not find especially funny. It was an elaborate, petty prank. Alan Sokol deliberately wrote a ridiculous article that combined physics jargon with buzzwords taken from postmodern philosophy and did his best to get it accepted into a social science journal. The idea was that if he could get his nonsense article published in a supposedly well-respected cultural journal, it would suggest that the editors were more concerned with whether the paper agreed with their philosophical leanings rather than on the merits of the paper itself. The result was chaos. The physicists and mathematicians found it hilarious. The philosophers and sociologists, though, they were understandably a little pissed off. In the end, Sokol never even got punished because, after all, how could he? He technically hadn't broken any rules, and it wasn't like he'd be missing out on any job opportunities. The only thing both sides agreed on was that Social Text had goofed up big time. To quote Alan's own words here, the mere fact of publication of my parody only proved that the editors of one particular journal, and a rather marginal one at that, had applied a lax intellectual standard. Sloppy sociology, like sloppy science, is useless, or even counterproductive. But you've seen the title of this video. This isn't a story about Alan Sokol. It's quite the opposite. 6 years after this prank, in late October of 2002, a new topic is posted on a forum. Physics Bit by Reverse Alan Sokol Hoax. This is bog.txt. Let's go on a trip. Let's meet our protagonist.
I think it's cool he made these the visual representation of the video chapters. He's made them dominoes, different colored colored and themed dominoes with a little picture. That's very clever. Very clever.
Agonists.
See, look at all this. This is what I'm talking about. Excuse me. We've got the text flying around. You go through the hole on the domino. Look at that. You get that nice camera angle and title reveal. This guy can edit.
This is Grichka. This is Igor. They are brothers. Twin brothers. These are the brothers Bogdanov. Here's a quick rundown. Igor and Grichka were born in August of 1949, Igor being the elder by about 40 minutes. They would go on to be the oldest of 6 children. But they are not just any old pair of baby boomers. Although they were born in Gascony, France, and are French citizens to this day, they are the children of 2 separate aristocratic families, which paints a complicated genealogical tapestry. They get their last name from their father, Yuri Mikhailovich Ostensakin Bogdanov, a Russian painter whose ancestry stretches back to the time of the noble Bogdanovs. This was back when Russia was more into Tsars than stars. Their maternal grandmother was Countess Bertha Kollarak-Krakowska, who herself was married to a member of the Austrian princely house of Colloredo-Mansfeld. During this time in the Austrian royal court, she once organized a concert featuring Roland Hayes, one of the first black jazz musicians ever. She and Roland then began an illicit affair leading to the birth of the Bogdanovs' mother, Maria, and their eventual expulsion from Austrian nobility. The Bogdanov brothers spent most of their childhood being raised in the south of France in a castle belonging to their grandmother. And at all moments they were surrounded by 2 personal tutors, nearly 50 housekeepers, and 15,000 books in the family library. The twins quickly learned German, French, Russian, and English, mainly through exposure from their housekeepers. Both brothers are well versed in multiple instruments, and both are regular pilots of planes and helicopters. For most of their childhood, they were inseparable, but as they grew up, their differences emerged. Igor has been married 4 times and has 6 children between 3 of them. His spouses range from TV personalities to rich aristocrats. Grichka, on the other hand, has never been married and has no children. Whereas Igor has a diploma in semiotics, the study of symbols, Grichka has a diploma in political science. As far as their personalities go, I have a scarce number of interview clips to go on. Igor is apparently the extrovert, and Grichka is the introvert. Grichka has his head in the stars. Igor is much more grounded. These are quotes, which I'm going to take at face value because I don't think it matters that much. Igor and Grichka are 2 halves of a singular entity. They exist as a pair, a unit that does not make sense unless treated as a whole. They don't seem real, and we're just the pawns in whatever cosmic game they're playing. Speaking of the cosmos, here they are on their big break. Tant X. Although relatively unknown to international audiences, the brothers Bog were once mega celebrities in 1980s France. Tant X was a speculative sci-fi show where the 2 of them dressed up in gaudy aluminum jumpsuits and interviewed various writers and filmmakers about up-and-coming sci-fi. The show was a smash hit, airing for 9 seasons between 1979 and 1987, and it launched the brothers' careers. At its peak, it's estimated that 28% of the channel's audience watched them. This success happened for a few key reasons. Number 1, sci-fi was going through a bit of a renaissance at this time, with Star Wars and Star Trek at the height of their popularity, and the public had a fascination with robots, transporters, and warp-speed drives. And when the show was airing, they were talking about stuff like decoding the genome and the internet back when those were just sci-fi, and now they're real. The second reason is that Tant X broadcasted on the TF1 network, which at the time was one of the 3 TV channels in France that was free for anyone to watch. And the third reason should be obvious from any of these photos. Look at these beefcakes. These are 2 good-looking guys. After their initial run on Tant X, they would go on to host a few additional miniseries here and there, but with an increasingly lukewarm reception from the public. Their TV era had passed, but that didn't stop them from co-writing a whopping 16 books together. on topics ranging from the keys to writing good sci-fi, to speculative fiction about the last day of the dinosaurs, and even the origin of the Big Bang. Of course, they take issue with me calling their work fiction. Their books and shows have faced repeated criticism from the scientific community for basic inaccuracies. For example, they claim that a decreasing infinite series always has to approach zero, which is not true, and that the expansion of the universe means the solar system was smaller when it first came into existence. The solar system has in fact been largely the same size since it was first formed. Just for context, I got one of their books at the library for research purposes, and this one came with some comments in the margins. Quel bavard. Connerie. Petite bite. This one's just so what, idiot? Let me tell you though, after reading one of their books, I get it. Like, I get the appeal. Their books shouldn't be used in place of graduate level textbooks, but they write delightful overviews of complex topics. Their style is, at times, overly self-indulgent. This book may just change your life. But that's not exactly rare when it comes to other pop science authors. Look, whether it's a clip from the 80s in aluminum foil jumpsuits, or a clip from a talk show last year, the twins are excellent public speakers. Of course, anyone born in the 90s and onwards won't know them for their TV days. The twins are most well known for having undergone many rounds of plastic surgery.
I have to take some medicine, so I'm gonna hide the webcam for a hot minute because I have to inject it, so I don't want to be streaming that over the airwave.
With their most recent and drastic round occurring in 2010. To be serious for a second, when people are willing to undergo expensive and risky surgeries to modify their bodies like this, there is obviously some sort of body dysmorphia going on.
Oh wait,
I don't
it's these
feel
guys?
comfortable making that a punchline. Instead, I want you to consider that we're going to see many valid reasons for criticizing
That's where
the
these
brothers
guys?
throughout this video that aren't related to their facial features. The Bogdanov
Oh.
twins, who are now in their 70s, have had a long and bumpy career, but have managed to just barely cling to relevancy through a combination of genuine charm and absurd antics. But this video is about one particular period of their life. Specifically, the events that led to this forum post on October 24th, 2002. This is the story of how Igor and Grichka became Dr. Igor and Dr. Grichka. Details about how, when, and why the Bogdanovs got their PhDs are unfortunately scarce, but this is what we know for sure. Tant X lasted for 9 seasons. By any measure, a massively successful run. Ultimately, it was cancelled when the TF1 network was privatized in 1987, and for the next 3 years the brothers went on a media hiatus, spending their time writing more sci-fi books exploring their love of cosmology, as well as the relationship between science and religion. A topic that has always been at the forefront of their writing is the origin of the universe, the fractions of a second that immediately followed the Big Bang. This topic would eventually wind up as the core of their respective PhD theses. For whatever reason, the twins began seriously pursuing doctorates in 1991. They've stated in an interview that they always planned to pursue PhDs, but ultimately got sidetracked by their TV show. But now, at the cusp of their 40s, the time was right. This is not meant to be a slight against them. Plenty of people get PhDs later in life, but considering their existing fame and successful book career, the question remained, why bother now? They initially enrolled in 1991 for primordial cosmology at the University of Bordeaux. However, they only managed to last 2 years there, and were ultimately driven away when members of the faculty objected. They objected on the grounds that they were trying to base their work on content from their existing books, which did not meet the standards of a doctoral program. John D. Barrow, a professor of mathematical sciences at the University of Cambridge, says the brothers contacted him at that time with an odd request. They were very anxious to obtain PhDs very quickly, and they tried to con me into becoming an examiner. There were these 2 theses they had submitted. They were laughable compendiums. A couple of years later, in 1993, they made a second attempt and moved to Dijon, where they enrolled at the University of Burgundy. Their first supervisor was a mathematical physicist named Moshe Flato. Flato would sadly pass away in 1998, so unfortunately there isn't really a record of his opinion on the brothers. A colleague of Flato, mathematician Daniel Sternheimer, would take over their duties as supervisor. Thankfully, we have a lot more insight from him. Dr. Sternheimer described the twins as stubborn wonder kids with very high IQs who have a hard time understanding that they are not the Einstein brothers, and prone to shooting themselves in the foot with vague statements and an impressionistic style. The focus of their work are on the first few moments of the Big Bang, when the universe was still in the so-called Planck era, or approximately 10 to the negative 34 seconds after the Big Bang. That's 34 zeros. That's a very small number, very, very small. This is the smallest unit of time that has any meaning under quantum mechanics. After the Planck era is when all of the quarks and the atoms formed, and we have some decent theories about how all that happened, but before that we know very little about the state of the universe. The brothers claim that at this time scale, the usual math used for quantum mechanics falls apart, and a new mathematical construction is required. On June 26th of 1999, after nearly a decade of work, Igor and Grichka would defend their theses. Grichka passed with the distinction of...
I see what you're saying, Swanty. Some of it's a little overused. Yeah, there should be maybe something else to. Well, I know I get it if he doesn't want to put his face out there, but breaking up this kind of stuff with like just talking to the webcam or delivering your lines to the camera. Probably would raise the production values even more, actually.
Honorable. Sounds great, until you realize that is the rarely given absolute lowest passing grade for a PhD. Most successful candidates receive the distinction of très, or very honorable. To quote one of his thesis reviewers, this only happens to the worst students. The students you only want to get out of the system. And even then, Grichka was torn apart in the question and answer section. He answered almost none of the questions correctly, especially those focused on the physics. According to another reviewer, the mathematicians on the jury made a case that he could pass as long as he changed his degree subject from physics to mathematics, in addition to heavy revisions. Igor, on the other hand, did not strictly fail. He would dispute that choice of words. So, to use his own words, he withdrew his thesis because the review committee was hostile. However, he was told he could reattempt if he could manage to publish in 3 or 4 journals, which to be clear, is an extremely bizarre condition for granting a doctorate. It's straight up unheard of. If this feels like a cop-out, it is. Despite this bizarre publishing condition, by the end of 2001, with the help of his brother, Igor had managed to publish 5 papers in 5 journals. And those journals were Annals of Physics, the Czechoslovak Journal of Physics, the Chinese Journal of Physics, Il Nuovo Cemento, and arguably the most notable, Classical and Quantum Gravity. He defended his thesis for a second time and was granted the title of doctor on July 8th of 2002. These two 53-year-olds were now doctors. And if Igor had passed on his first try like his brother, this might be the end of the story. You wouldn't be watching this video. Like many PhD candidates, their theses would fall into obscurity in the archives of a French university, and they would continue on their way to further book sales and a TV show or two. But when Igor submitted his work to journals, he made their work public. They had eyes on them now. We'll never know how many people saw the papers and didn't give them a second thought. Just by looking at the publication dates, they went nearly a full year with no one taking much notice. But then someone did. Every account of this story points to the same person as the originator. Max Niedermeyer sent an email to his colleague, Ted Newman, with a bizarre rumor. Supposedly, 2 brothers had managed to publish papers that were pure nonsense. Not just that though, they had conned their way to PhDs. This email spread like wildfire in the academic community, and eventually made its way to John Carlos Baez, professor at UCR. Now, without Baez, this story may not have blown up in the way it did. Keep in mind, it's 2002 and Google is still so new, people didn't use it as a verb yet. YouTube, Twitter, all the usual places where drama spreads these days, they just didn't exist yet. As for Baez, he had a bit of a reputation in the early internet days. Since 1993, he had been posting a column known as This Week's Finds in Mathematical Physics. So when Max Niedermeyer's email made its way to him on October 22nd, 2002, he was more than prepared to share his story with the board he moderated, sci.physics.research. One thing struck him about the story though. It reminded him of a similar situation from a few years earlier. And with that, he came up with the title, that would act as the flashpoint for the whole affair. John Baez opened his post with a callback to Alan Sokol's hoax, and then laid out the rumors as he'd heard them. Apparently, Igor and Grichka, two well-known French TV stars and writers, had been planning a hoax in the same way Alan Sokol had, but the punchline was swapped. Physics was the butt of the joke this time. The idea being that physics had gotten so niche and convoluted with too much jargon that no one could tell what was real and what was fake anymore. The first step in their alleged plan had been to interview prominent string theorists to master the jargon necessary for writing a gibberish PhD. Then, as part of a grand spectacle to cap off their hoax, they defended their thesis at l'École Polytechnique on the same day, with live TV crews and ate dinner with the president. Baez then ends his post with links to the brothers' theses and some quick comments about some of the gibberish that stood out to him. The forum went wild and began tearing into the papers, as well as generating several new threads. The conclusion most seemed to draw, even if they weren't 100% experts in the subject matter, was that all the vocabulary and buzzwords were real, but arranged in such a way that had little to no meaning. One of the most common examples had to do with Foucault's pendulum, that being the famous experiment where you set up a bunch of dominoes in a circle, you wait a day, and then the rotation of the Earth means the pendulum will knock over every single domino. We draw from the above that whatever the orientation, the plane of oscillation of Foucault's pendulum is necessarily aligned with the initial singularity marking the origin of physical space S3. John Baez is quick to point out that you can remove a bunch of words to say the following. Since the Big Bang happened everywhere, no matter which way a pendulum swings, the plane in which it swings can be said to intersect the Big Bang. Or even more simply, any plane contains a point. So why even invoke Foucault's pendulum at all? Well, it's likely the brothers invoked it because it's a famous piece of French scientific history, which wouldn't feel out of place in one of their books, for instance, but it does feel out of place in a highly technical academic paper. The papers as a whole are a jumbled mess of different ideas and concepts with a complete lack of coherence. Urs Schreiber went to the trouble of trying to summarize the papers into 5 central ideas, based on which types of jargon got used. He landed on A. Statistical mechanics, B. Topological field theory, C. Cosmology, D. String theory, and E. Quantum mechanics. And that might not sound that weird if you're not familiar with these fields, but they're 5 very distinct fields, and mixing and matching the jargon, it makes no sense. Schreiber even notes that the only reference to string theory is the Hadron temperature, and the rest of the paper has almost nothing to do with string theory. As the forum post picked up steam, bigger and bigger names started to weigh in. Alain Comte, winner of the Fields Medal, stated that I didn't need long to convince myself that they're talking about things they haven't mastered. Nobel Prize winner George Charpak made it clear that the Bogdanov's presence in the scientific community was non-existent. Perhaps the most shocking fact, however, was that 3 of the 5 papers appeared to be nearly identical, and that all of them were just shorter versions of the 8-page paper in classical and quantum gravity. And to be clear, it's not uncommon to get multiple papers from a single thesis. They're long and diverse pieces of work. But you're not supposed to literally submit the same paper to multiple journals. It seems Igor had found himself a loophole. Now, it should be clarified that the rumor John Baez had heard had been exaggerated. For one, the school was incorrect. Igor and Grichka had passed their doctorates 3 years apart, and no TV crew was involved. As for the rumor about the president, this one is obviously false, but its origins aren't that far-fetched. Pierre Sarkozy, son of then French President Nicolas Sarkozy, had been a producer for one of the brothers' TV shows. The last part of the rumor was harder to disprove. Were the brothers actually trying to pull off a hoax, or were they genuinely trying to get PhDs? The Usenet forum was split on this point. Some argued that the papers were too absurd not to be a hoax. It should be obvious to anyone in the field that they were nothing but a bunch of buzzwords strung together in a way that had no meaning. Other points in favor of the hoax premise was the brothers themselves. The brothers had backgrounds in social commentary and flashy theatrics, and they'd taken the last decade off from their lucrative careers to pursue lengthy PhDs. All signs pointed to them being up to something. But other posters countered that if it was a hoax, the thesis committee would have had to been complicit. People like Sternheimer, who are well respected, would be putting their jobs on the line for a pretty idiotic prank. Not to mention the university as a whole. Others pointed out that there was a key difference when comparing to Sokol's paper. Anyone who took a careful read of Sokol's paper could quickly find the humor in it. The vocabulary was so absurd that the hoax was almost begging to be discovered. But a reading of the brothers' work gave off the distinct impression of someone trying very hard to be taken seriously. So, are these misunderstood geniuses? Or are they the dumbest boys alive? The answer to this last mystery would come far sooner than anyone expected. The next day, from the brothers themselves. Dennis Overby, a reporter with the New York Times, had reached out to the brothers for comment, and they vehemently denied the hoax premise. They were adamant that their work was genuine, and they did not understand where the comparisons to the Sokol hoax were coming from. This was followed soon after on October 29th, when a joint account for Igor and Grichka dropped into the original forum thread. They opened by saying the accusations were pure nonsense, and that this campaign likely originated in France, and was due to an ancient editorial conflict that was attempting to slander them and their new TV show. They also quoted an apology from Max Niedermeyer. Niedermeyer had emailed the brothers to set the record straight about the initial exaggerated rumor, and the brothers used this as leverage to spin their slander conspiracy. They also began circulating an unsubstantiated rumor that the Harvard String Theory group had initially thought the papers were a hoax, only to change their minds when they were told it was real. No names ever got associated with this story, and is likely just a fabrication on the part of the brothers. In any case, the next week or so consisted of the brothers attempting, and largely failing, to respond to specific questions about their work. Folks like John Baez, Peter White, and Steve Carlip did their best to try and pin the brothers down, but as one article put it, it was like watching someone trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. The ever-humble brothers insisted that these folks just hadn't read their work carefully enough, and they were more than happy to validate rumors of their intelligence. As far as this geniuses question is concerned, well, let's say that we never advertised anything about it. The only thing which is true is that we have a solid training in IQ tests, so our results might seem impressive, over 200, but it does not mean much. We never talk about this, and even refuse to become members of Mensa. The forum had become essentially a dogpile on the brothers, and the more the twins spoke, the less willing people were to give them the benefit of the doubt. This process continued until late December, when it looked like things might finally be running out of steam. And now, it was time to pick up the pieces. The brothers had made it very clear that this was no hoax and that they would do anything to keep their degrees. Except it wasn't clear that anyone was trying to take away their degrees. After all, there was no evidence they had cheated or fabricated anything. They were passed by a committee who, despite the odd extra condition of publishing to journals, had treated them like normal students. If anything, the fact that their work had been approved by 5 separate journals, it meant that their work had been given the green light by dozens of people. The question was, had those referees been negligent? Let's start with the original thesis committee. This was not our specialty, he says. Nobody on the committee had any deep understanding of the ideas. In hindsight, the weakness is that there were no real experts. Maybe there are no real experts in what they are doing. What they are doing is so far out of the mainstream. Robert Cockerill stated that the brothers' work is certainly no better or worse than that of some established theoretical physicists. Igor's thesis had many things Dr. Jackie didn't understand, but he found it intriguing. All these were ideas that could possibly make sense. It showed some originality and some familiarity with the jargon. That's all I ask. The most damning quote is from their supervisor. Dr. Sternheimer says that he is not an expert in all points of Grichka's work, and so did not follow his every point. But some of the dissertation was in his field, and I made sure that that part deserved a PhD in mathematics. Still, he thinks that the brothers' strength is in popularizing science, not doing it. These guys worked for 10 years without pay. They have the right to have their work recognized with a diploma, which is nothing much these days. Ignatios Antoniadis was one of Grichka's reviewers who later reversed his judgment. I had given a favorable opinion for Grichka's defense, based on a rapid and indulgent reading of the thesis text. Alas, I was completely mistaken. The scientific language was just an appearance behind which hid incompetence and ignorance of even basic physics. As for the papers, the outlook is not much better. One report only has a few notes, and all of them are about typos or citation formatting. Another asks for fixes to spacing and equation formatting. Almost no comments on the mathematics. That's not to say all the reviewers were at fault. Eli Hawkins, on the other hand, gave the brothers a harsh negative review for the Annals of Physics. It is difficult to describe what is wrong in Section 4 since almost nothing is right. It would take up too much space to enumerate all the mistakes. Indeed, it is difficult to say where one error ends and the next begins. In conclusion, I would not recommend that this paper be published in this or any journal. So were there any consequences? Fewer than you'd hope for. Classical and Quantum Gravity issued a statement admitting that they were aware as early as April that the paper did not meet their current editorial guidelines and that it shouldn't have been published. But rather than retracting the paper, they published comments and replies to correct the mistake. Annals of Physics was the only journal to actually retract the paper. The agreement to use publications as the critical benchmark for granting a degree is ass backwards, says Frank A. Wilczek, a professor of physics at MIT. It's a real cop-out by the committee and totally unacceptable. Wilczek eventually got hired on as the editor-in-chief of Annals of Physics after the scandal, and he vowed to correct the journal's slipping standards. The remaining 3 journals never commented. Jacques Distler made a good point. The brothers hadn't uploaded their papers to the online archive generally used by most physicists at this point. Because of this, almost no one would have read them. This is more evidence that they were trying to fly under the radar. Jacques argues that it was the association with the Sokol hoax that caused anyone to bother paying attention to them. And there is credibility to that idea. John Bay has mentioned that an NYT reporter was only interested in doing a story on the scandal if the paper was a hoax, not just a paper people thought was a hoax. Everyone in their kitchen sink had an opinion on what the scandal meant for physics. Peter Woit argued that the Bogdanovs' work is significantly more incoherent than just about anything else being published. But the increasingly low standard of coherence in the whole field is what allowed them to think that they were doing something sensible and to get it published. Steve Carlip had a more middle-of-the-road take. Referees are volunteers, who as a whole put in a great deal of work for no credit, no money, and little or no recognition, for the good of the community. Sometimes a referee makes a mistake. Sometimes 2 referees make the same mistake at the same time. I'm a little surprised that anyone is surprised at this. Surely you've seen bad papers published in good journals before this. Referees give opinions. The real peer review begins after a paper is published. But out of all these opinions, I imagine you're mainly interested in one in particular. What did Alan Sokol think? What's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. An expression I'm sure means something but which I refuse to look up. Okay, fine. Apparently it means he was disappointed that he didn't have a true rival for his hoax. After all, to repeat his quote from earlier, sloppy sociology, like sloppy science, is useless, or even counterproductive. Now sure, the intentions were different, but the end result has largely been the same. The fact that no one could tell whether the papers were a hoax or not says a lot about the editorial standards of a few journals, but should not be taken as a grand indictment of a whole field. Also, there's nowhere else to fit this into the script, but Alan Sokol's profile picture is a Breath of the Wild, and I just really wanted to include that. The brothers continued to insist that the true value of their work would become obvious if you just read their papers. So, sure, let's play by their rules. A work of such obvious importance must have a few citations. And would you look at that? I'm sure this is exactly what they meant. I guess in the end, everyone moved on with their lives and let the brothers fade into obscurity. And for a pair of celebrities, that may be the worst ending they could have hoped for. That's all I have for you. Thanks for watching. Hello?
Monsieur Brocoli, aviez-vous l'impression que cette vidéo était terminée? Tu n'oublies pas quelque chose?
You've got mail. You've got mail. You've got mail. You've got mail. You've got mail.
He's doing like a little music video to his credit stuff. Oh, I was muted the whole
Sorry, did I
time.
keep-
Oh, I'm just I'm not feeling 100% right now, so we're gonna watch part 2. I might go rest my eyes for about 5-10 minutes, but I'm listening to myself on the live stream. I'm just off today.
Keep you waiting. Apologies for the hiatus, but we've had some new breakthroughs in the curious case of the Bog brothers. If you're just now joining us for the first time, part 1 is linked below, but to summarize, a pair of wealthy French twins managed to fake their way into PhDs by writing 5 nonsense physics papers. And for a while it looked like that was the end of the story. So how did we get to this? Well, it's actually a long story, so sit tight, relax, and let's pick up where we left off. The forum post that exposed the brothers was made in October of 2002, and it was quickly flooded with traffic. Within the first week, the brothers themselves even made an appearance. By early November, the news outlets had picked up the story while the brothers continued to get dogpiled. After a while, though, the brothers had learned to stop posting public comments, and had started privately emailing scientists to level the playing field. But after a while, the scientists got bored. It was like talking to a brick wall. Arguing with the brothers privately wasn't productive, and was far less interesting than seeing it play out in a public forum where people could spectate. For most of 2003, things remained quiet. At least that's what it seemed like at the time. In hindsight, the brothers were active behind the scenes, but for now, we'll skip forward to 2004. By that point, Igor and Grichka had a new show airing, Rayon X, and in June they had released a new book, Avant le Big Bang. Big Bang doesn't have a translation in French, it's just Big Bang. I find that very funny. This book adapted their thesis work into their signature pop style, full of mysticism and grand ideas. Most relevant to us, though, it's where they shared their perspective on the controversy. What is notable, however, are several quotes from critics which are suspiciously lacking in criticism. They almost come off as endorsements. Peter Woit, for instance, had spoken with the brothers via email, and was surprised to find that part of their conversation had unknowingly made it into their book. Even more surprising was that the quote was more supportive than he remembered it being. His sentence, "It's certainly possible that you have some new worthwhile results on quantum groups," got translated into the following. Certainly possible became absolutely certain. A polite send-off had transformed into a glowing review. An innocent mistake? Maybe? But this wasn't an isolated incident. John D. Georges had a quote mistranslated as well. Incomprehensible articles cannot pass through such a procedure, and certainly not 5 times. Now, if I read that quote out of context, I'd assume he was defending their papers, as in, their papers had to have some value to make it through the review process. But his actual quote was, "Nonsense is not supposed to get through this process, certainly not 5 times. It's a subtle difference, but it's there. Cannot pass and not supposed to pass are 2 very different meanings." Now, it's one thing to mistranslate the words of your critics and have them call you out. Of course they'd be mad. But it's another thing entirely to get called out by people who once defended your work. Roman Jackie, who approved their PhDs, stated that the translation of his reference was very optimistic. Sean Majid, another of the PhD committee, was less polite, stating that the mistranslation was non-authorized and a fabrication by the brothers. His words, interesting results, had been changed to important results, and a draft mathematical construction became the first mathematical construction. Now, the mistranslations show a pattern of behavior, but there is at least plausible deniability due to English being their third or fourth language. But the twins have even misattributed praise to the wrong person. Early on in the scandal, they sent out an email that quoted supportive statements by a Laurent Fredel. Fredel denies making those remarks. Fredel had merely forwarded an email message containing the supportive remarks, and the brothers attributed them to him. Now, Avant le Big Bang is a lengthy book, and beyond the mistranslations and misquotes, there are plenty of major and minor technical mistakes. User YBM has a great post on the Epiphysics forums where they break down all the errors and inaccuracies, which I've linked below. The brothers promised to respond to this list in 2 to 3 days, but ultimately waited 3 months before claiming they had a 60-page response written up, only to never post it. They did, however, double down and later triple down on one bizarre inaccuracy, which in the grand scheme of their book was nowhere near their worst mistake. They claim in the book that the golden ratio is a transcendental number. A transcendental number is one that cannot be expressed in terms of the root of a polynomial. You probably know the most famous example of this, pi, whose decimal places just go on forever without any pattern. The mistake they made was that the golden ratio isn't actually a transcendental number, because it's the solution to this equation, therefore making it an irrational number. The difference here is very subtle, but it's still a mistake. But in their usual fashion, they denied any fault, and at first the brothers provided links to convoluted algebraic proofs to argue that it was in fact transcendental, which only further exposed their incompetence when it came to mathematics. But after that failed to convince anyone, they then claimed that they meant to include quotation marks around the word transcendental, because they didn't actually mean it in the strict mathematical definition. They meant it in a way that the average reader would understand, like the common usage of that word. I mean, I can think of a few other adjectives you could have used that aren't already mathematical terms, like legendary, universal, iconic, like any of those would have been fine. And the way that they tried to prove this was that they linked to a photocopied version of their first draft to prove it was a mistake of their editor to remove the quotation marks around transcendental. YBM, again, going the extra mile here, pointed out that if you viewed the pictures in an image editor, Igor had left in clear signs of photoshopping. The spacing around the quotation marks are out of whack, and you can actually see part of the letter T is cut off by the rectangular snipping tool. Why the brothers felt that they needed to save face over this dumb, trivial issue was never explained, and a lot of people thought that this would be the peak of their absurdity. By this point, it had become clear to everyone that the twins were not looking to engage with critics in good faith. Continuing to interact with them was at best a waste of time, and at worst an opportunity for them to twist your words in their favor. And again, this could easily have been the end of the story. The academics got bored and were ready to move on. But the brothers simply wouldn't let that happen.
You've got mail.
It was assumed that throughout 2003 and 2004, the twins were occupied with the publishing of their newest book and their most recent TV show. A careful look back, though, would reveal that they also had other, more secret projects underway. The involvement of Dr. Yang in this odyssey is, to me at least, what elevates it from a simple story of nonsense PhDs to a bizarre revenge feud. The first mention of Dr. Liu Yang is from John Baez. He received an email out of the blue from a professor he didn't recognize, claiming to be with the International Institute of Mathematical Physics at Hong Kong University in Kowloon. Dr. Yang was a defender of the brothers' work, but Baez had better things to do than argue with a professor that he'd never heard of before, so he never replied. This would have been the end of it, but as the summer rolled around, Baez had been contacted by Dennis Overby, the reporter who had written the New York Times article on the scandal. He too had received an email from this Dr. Yang. Curious at this point, Baez took advantage of his current situation. See, by sheer coincidence, he was visiting Kowloon that summer and decided to contact Hong Kong U. Not only was there no record of a Dr. Yang, but there was no Institute of Mathematical Physics either. Something was clearly afoot, but the answer wouldn't come until December 29th. Jacques Dissler received a similar email from Dr. Yang, but he went the extra mile of tracing the email's IP. Bizarre, isn't it, that an email ending with the domain for Hong Kong appears to be coming from a Wanadu subscriber in Paris. Huh. Maybe that's why Dr. Yang's speech is full of grammatical errors that are out of place for a Hong Kong native, but common for a native French speaker. What valid arguments can you oppose to them? Certainly not a meaningless prose. Elaborate scientifically, their critics. But wait, there's more. Peter Voigt also received an email from a Roland Schwartz, and wow, look at that, the same region of Paris. At this point, you might expect me to say that the brothers denied any involvement with the emails, but you'd be giving them too much credit. Their explanation was that Dr. Yang had been staying at Igor's apartment and had used his computer. Okay! It's almost certain that the brothers had been using sock puppets long before this point. I took a look back at the original forum thread and found a few posts that could very well have been sock puppets back then as well. However, the brothers started responding to people as themselves very soon after this post, so I'm not surprised that it flew under the radar. It's fairly easy to spot a Bogdanov sock puppet purely from the writing style. The three giveaways tend to be A. Grammar mistakes characteristic of a French speaker. B. Enthusiastic praise for the Bogdanovs' work, and that everyone else clearly just hasn't read the papers. And C. Long, detailed replies where they nitpick every sentence of a critique. Sadly, a lot of these forum posts have been lost because a lot of the early internet just isn't preserved that well. Thankfully, at least some of these records have been archived on the Epiphysics forums, and I'll use their records as an illustrative example. The activity on the Epiphysics forums began in early 2004. The first is apparently another Hong Kong native known as Huang Lu. This was followed by a Hayes from Australia, a nod to their grandfather, perhaps. These two were especially obvious because Hayes accidentally replied to himself when he clearly meant to reply to Huang Lu. Next was Golevin and Pierre. When people pointed out that these four accounts were all posting from similar IPs, two of them admitted that they just worked in the same lab. They tried to defend themselves by saying that obtaining a .edu address is highly restricted and thus could only have come from a real university. This is not true at all. It's actually pretty easy to get a .edu email address through proxies. They also make the mistake of having Golevin deny knowing Hayes, which contradicts a post from Hayes where he says that the group is made up of 10 close-knit researchers. The sock puppets then died down for several months until June 5th, which is right around the release of Avant le Big Bang. This is when we see the appearance of an account going by Herve, claiming to be a professor at a large Parisian university. Seems that they learned from the other IP traces. Herve spends a lot of time attacking Fabien Benau, a vocal critic of the brothers' new book. Herve disappears soon after, giving rise to the famous Roland Schwartz from earlier. Curiously, Roland somehow had access to and then publicly posts the reports from the brothers' thesis examiners. How does this man have this? On June 14th, we see the grand return of the leader of the sock puppet gang. Dr. Yang burst onto the forums with these same referee reports as Roland Schwartz, but also a scathing attack on Nobel Prize winner George Charpak. On June 15th, we see the brief arrival of a Paul, a Frenchman, and also a Wather Porter, another Australian. Both continue to attack the book critic Fabien Benau. These posts contain my favorite insult of the whole scandal. Who are you to claim to settle the case of the Bogdanovs? I looked at your scientific prize list. It is very thin. You have no posts. Looking back a few days, we had a single appearance by a Belloribel on June 11th, and a Jean-Pierre/Petitot. The last cast member to be introduced is a Bene Facio on June 17th. From this point on, it is largely the same cast of pseudonyms circulating the same disinformation and attacks, either on more forums, blogs, or even personal one-on-one emails. But some commenters make a good point, that in some cases the variation in punctuation and writing style suggests that the twins may have recruited some friends, or they just have some avid fans ready to come to their defense. Some point to Bene Facio as a potential ally of the brothers and not just the brothers themselves. I also identified Ark as one of their allies, and they're a character that will come back later on. And of course, there are many posts simply labeled anonymous, which almost certainly were the brothers themselves. Whatever the case, the replies usually look something like this. Without wishing to glorify them, blah 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 blah, they are amazing guys. Now, one mystery that didn't have a clear answer was where the brothers were continuing their research that they loved to talk about so much. Surely if there was value to their work, they could work as postdocs at some university. Well, Igor eventually started circulating a link to what he called the Mathematical Center of Riemannian Cosmology. Supposedly, this was the research center he and Grichka were working at, situated somewhere in Riga, the capital of Latvia. Now, it did have the correct .edu.lv domain name, but pinging the host revealed that rather than being hosted somewhere in, say, Eastern Europe, the host originated in the US. Isn't it also strange that this supposedly internationally recognized institution only has two researchers, Igor and Grichka? Maybe we can ask Peter Voigt. He happens to have family from Latvia, and he was quick to point out that, to his knowledge, no such institute exists. This part of the saga ultimately culminated with one of the crazier parts of this story. The twins got banned from Wikipedia. See, after the initial forum post, the brothers and various sock puppets took to editing Igor's Wikipedia page to more positively represent him. This massive amount of back and forth editing led to the creation of an entirely separate page about the scandal itself, and the article remains one of the most detailed and well-written sources on the scandal to this day. Eventually, Wikipedia's arbitration committee had to get involved, and that's extremely rare. For context, this committee deals with stuff like Scientology or a feud between politicians. It's effectively Wikipedia's Supreme Court. Igor and many other sock puppets were explicitly banned from editing the article. This was done under the assumption that if all their edits are to the Bogdanov article, they clearly are involved in the scandal and have a bias. This applied to all parties involved, pro and con, leading to some collateral damage. The ban went into effect on November 11, 2005, and has remained to this day. The brothers had lost their case in the Supreme Court of Wikipedia. Ironically, if the brothers had just let things be, there wouldn't even be an article about the scandal, and their attempts to censor the info led to the editors working even harder to preserve it. It was a small victory. Sadly, one that would be overshadowed by the battles that were yet to come. Unbeknownst to the wider public, on February 27, 2003, the CNRS would publish a private judgment on the theses of Igor and Grichka. The CNRS is the state-run French National Center for Scientific Research. The investigation into the Bogdanov PhDs was supposedly done at the behest of the president of the University of Burgundy and director of physics and mathematics at the CNRS. Whatever the findings of that report, they apparently had no impact on the careers of Igor and Grichka, as no move to revoke their PhDs was ever initiated. For whatever reason, the report was deemed confidential and attempts from journalists to receive a copy were rejected. We know this because the French magazine, Ciel et Espace, requested a copy of the report in 2004 and 2008 and was denied both times. Why did they want the report? Because Igor and Grichka were suing them for defamation. In October 2004, Ciel et Espace ran an article on the Bogdanov affair up to that point. This article mostly summarizes what we already know: the initial forum post, Dr. Yang, the mistranslations, but also some interesting quotes from the brothers describing the thesis process as a politically motivated revenge plot. In their eyes, they think that the French academic establishment was embarrassed to be giving PhDs to TV stars. Because of this, the brothers sued the magazine, but barely a year later they had given up on the case. No, really, they never even withdrew the case. They missed a bunch of deadlines and had to pay fines to the court. No ruling ever got made. It's unclear why the brothers gave up so easily. Maybe they thought that Ciel et Espace would be intimidated into issuing an apology, but that clearly didn't work. The second time around, they didn't give up so easily, and they came up with a more underhanded tactic. Back in 1991, the twins had approached John Barrow, asking him to serve on their PhD committee. This was before they were kicked out in 1993 and had to restart at a new university. They were very anxious to obtain PhDs very quickly, and they tried to con me into becoming an examiner. There were 2 theses they had submitted. They were laughable compendiums. He would send an early draft of Grichka's 1991 thesis to a colleague in France, Alain Riazuelo. When the scandal came to light nearly a decade later, Alain hosted an early version of Grichka's thesis on his website along with criticism. The website received a whopping traffic of 62 views. But of course, this insult couldn't go unanswered, and in May 2011, Grichka sued Alain for copyright infringement. And after nearly a year, he won! Alain was ordered to pay only a single euro in damages, a symbolic punishment. But the French scientific community was outraged. An open letter signed by 170 academics railed against the legal system, arguing that this was a transparent attempt to silence criticism under the veil of a copyright dispute. The next twist in the story took even the brothers by surprise. On October 15th of 2010, the French magazine Marianne got hold of a copy of the mythical CNRS report and published 8 pages from it, with the names of all the authors redacted and no signatures shown. What this means is that someone from the CNRS leaked it to reporter Nathalie Gauthier. The report was scathing. It would be easy, but cruel, to list the numerous errors which spatter this text. One of the 8 chapters of this thesis contains a construction at the level one might find in an undergraduate essay, but very badly written. The other 7 contribute nothing to mathematics. Unfortunately, even a rapid reading evokes strong suspicions about the scientific contribution and about the quality of the presentation of this work, and a deeper analysis only confirms these suspicions. The conclusion of this report, based on the detailed analysis presented below, is clear and unambiguous. The value of this work is nil. The Bogdanovs, as you might expect, were seething. According to them, they had zero knowledge of this report's existence, and given that they had yet another TV show airing, the timing was less than ideal. The brothers acted fast.
Hey, Bolly, welcome to the stream. I'm a little under the weather today, so I was just chilling out. I feel a little bit better now, so we're gonna keep up with the job hunt. Swanty says, I like modern vintage gamer videos, simple, informative, no fuzz, no artistic about his channel, nor is that his goal. He might show a screenshot from Reddit. There's just some color behind it. I get dizzy at this video we were watching. Yeah, it could be a little overdone.
And initiated an aggressive set of legal proceedings that lasted for nearly a decade. They claimed that in addition to defamation, the publication of the report violated their private lives.
Yeah, I can see what you mean by getting dizzy, because
it prevented them from promoting their
it's too much. It's not. It should be. The camera should be moving like 80% less, basically.
So let's break down the results. The brothers successfully won a 3-year-long court battle against the magazine Marianne for publishing the report. The ruling was based on what the court considered defamatory remarks that went beyond simple criticism. Words like fictional and imposters. The judge also cited the lack of signatures on the leaked report, the redacted authors, and not asking the brothers for comment first as key factors in the ruling of the case. The court did not consider the report a breach of their private lives, however, since the report was purely a technical assessment with no personal details. This may seem like an odd angle for the brothers to take, but France has some of the strongest privacy laws in the world, so it wasn't as unrealistic as you might expect. In the end, Marianne was ordered to pay damages for the defamatory remarks, 640,000 euros. Riding high off of this victory, the brothers chose a new target. The CNRS! Oh my god! The brothers' demands to the CNRS were to do one of the following. Either get the CNRS to deny that the report was genuine, or publicly withdraw it, neither of which they agreed to do. Mainly though, they wanted the CNRS held responsible for leaking the report, which to this day has no confirmed whistleblower. They argued that the deputy communication director, who confirmed to the magazine that the report was genuine, should be at fault, and they wanted 1 million euros. The courts ruled in favor of the CNRS on June 16th, 2015. Afterwards, the CNRS asked to make the report public, which was denied by France's agency that oversees personal data. Again, France has very strong privacy laws. The brothers continued to appeal this judgment, finally ending on July 24th, 2019. The brothers, dramatic as ever, vow to bring the case to the European Court of Human Rights. So, moral of the story: if you want to criticize the brothers, try being born not French. I alluded to this a bit earlier, but the brothers were not without their supporters. And I'm not talking about their book publishers or the TV executives that continue to give them a spotlight. I mean the ride-or-die defenders of their work who are willing to put their reputations on the line for the brothers. These are the four horsemen of the Bogpocalypse. Do you remember Ark from the Sock Puppet chapter? I very briefly mentioned them. Turns out it's short for Arkagius Jadzik. He is, from what I can find, a genuine quantum physicist from Poland who was a fervent supporter of the brothers even from the initial forum thread in 2002. At one point, it seems he even coordinated with the brothers by pretending he was part of whatever fictional institute the brothers had set up, alongside the fictional Dr. Yang. More concretely, he gave the foreword for their book, Avant le Big Bang. From the brothers' point of view, this was a win-win. They get to point to this guy's fancy credentials. But what exactly does Arkagius get from this arrangement? Well, it didn't take much digging to find out. He runs a blog, Cassiopeia, along with his wife, that is nothing short of batshit crazy. Basically, every conspiracy theory under the sun, from JFK, 9/11, who wrote the Bible, and the nebulous global elite. Believe it or not, the next horseman is weirder. In 2008, a fairly young and unknown string theorist, Lubos Model, published a book titled The Bog...
Hey Flame Mage, welcome to the stream. We're checking. This is like part 2. You're getting in late to this documentary thing we've been watching. I like this guy's channel because he's got some high production values, and instead of just like posting this picture here, he puts it on like a board and Blender and checking all that out. And it's there's basically like these two guys. They're like TV show stars in the 80s, and then they started. Nobody can tell if they're actually trolling physicists or if they just love the smell of their own farts or something. I guess that's what it is. Like these two guys are just trolling, like academia basically. They're have a very unique perspective on the whole world, on the whole thing, I guess.
Bogdanov equation, the secret of the universe. Many of those familiar with the scandal speculated that this book had been partly ghostwritten by the Bogdanovs. I'm less than convinced, and rather than some sort of sinister ghostwriting conspiracy, I have this far less complicated explanation. The brothers get to point to academics who support their work, and people like Lubos get to write books that profit off the publicity from the scandal. What would have been a bog standard physics text that got lost in the shuffle got a huge publicity boost by piggybacking off the scandal, naming it after an equation that never gets revealed. I checked in on him in 2020.
What a brainwashed, demented pile of excrements you are. Facebook isn't remotely Marxist. It is a full-blown hardcore Marxist organization that is borderline unusable for every non-Marxist person.
Buddy, I wish.
This is my private blog whose comment section is not open to the public, and that fact has consequences. You are effectively a violent, stupid troll who has broken into my living room through the window. If I had a firearm, I would have the right to shoot you dead.
The one nice thing I'll say about Lubos is that at least he's not a 5G truther. Next, we have Luis Gonzalez Mestres, a cosmologist with CNRS who, oh wow, wrote the foreword for Le Mystère du Satellite Planck, another one of the brothers' books. He later wrote his own book, L'énigme Bogdanov, in 2015. This book piggybacks off the Bogdanov affair to opine about the state of research in France and some general whining about censorship. Lewis is perhaps the most normal of the Bogdanov horsemen, or at least the only one smart enough to keep his spiciest opinions off the internet. Finally, we have Micah Jovanovic, the founder of Megatrend University in Serbia, where he appointed the brothers as professors of cosmology. And incidentally, our buddy Lewis too. Micah also, and I hope you're seeing the pattern here, wrote the foreword for and published one of their books in Serbia. Isn't it weird that every defender of the brothers has some sort of financial incentive to support them? Note that if you spent just one day on campus, it would reveal that Megatrend U, an economics school, doesn't even have a cosmology department. More generally, however, Megatrend University is known for being a degree mill that, among other things, lies about its enrollment figures, lies about who its lecturers are, lies about its university affiliates, and I swear to God I'm not making this next one up. Micah Jovanovic, the founder, resigned from his job when it was revealed that he lied about getting a PhD from the London School of Economics. Great minds think alike. Now the Horsemen are a small group, and thankfully it's easy to discredit.
Imagine how much crap you used to be able to get away with before the internet. You could just say you had like a PhD from some like University of France or some stuff like that, and what do you, it's not like you'd have to go get the phone book, and then you'd have to call the operator, and then you'd have to ask the operator to get you the number to the France thing, and then you'd have to get connected, and then you'd have to call them. You used to have to like do a bunch of work to get a bunch of information. Now you just put it in a search box.
Them by just showing people the shady business practices or the conspiracy theories. But this rabbit hole goes deeper, and you're not going to enjoy where we end up. This is the Google search trend for the Bogdanovs since 2010. The largest spike on this graph coincides with the most drastic round of plastic surgery the twins have undergone, where they went from looking like this to this. Although they were well known for their appearance prior to this point, this was what elevated them from French aristocrats to an internationally recognized tabloid sensation. Again, I want to stress that body dysmorphia shouldn't be a punchline, and I only mention it because it's relevant to what happened next. As the years went by, they gradually became more and more well known outside of France, with multiple Reddit posts in 2015 getting thousands of upvotes on r/WTF. In late 2016, things moved to 4chan. And at first the posts were much like they were on Reddit, just worse in every single way. Jokes about their appearance still, but with a lot more edge and every category of slur you can imagine. Just checking off all the boxes. And believe it or not, it escalated from there. It wasn't just jokes about their appearances now. People were asking a different question. What's their end game? People alluded to their connections to French President Sarkozy, their aristocratic lineage, and vast wealth. You can probably tell where this is going. By this point, 4chan had fallen in love with the brothers, and the boards were flooded with various bog-related memes. For people out of the loop, seeing the message board spammed with pictures of these two odd-looking men was pretty confusing, and led to a lot of questions. But in January of 2017,
I had no idea.
Someone finally said the words. Can I get a quick rundown?
Rothschild's Boda Bogdanovs, in contact with aliens, possess psychic-like abilities, control friends with an iron but fair fist.
Direct descendants of the ancient royal bloodline will bankroll the first cities on Mars, all 99% of DNA editing research facilities on Earth.
Both brothers said to have 215+ IQ. Such intelligence on Earth has only existed deep in Tibetan monasteries in Area 51.
They learned fluent French in under a week. Nation-states entrust their gold reserves with the twins. The twins are about 7 decades old, from the space-time reference point of the base human currently accepted by our society. In reality, they are timeless beings existing in all points of time and space from the Big Bang to the end of the universe. We don't know their ultimate plans yet. We hope they're benevolent beings.
This is what's known as the quick rundown copy pasta. Whenever someone out of the loop asks who the brothers are, they're immediately swarmed with replies just like this one. From this point on, the quick rundown copy-pasta becomes a living document. The individual lines are changed or updated to match current events, but the sentiment stays the same. We bow to the bogs, and we have taken the bog pill. Or to put it another way,
Bogdanov brothers are red pills in human form. And the best thing about them is that they're on our side.
I imagine that a lot of you are at least partially aware of what the red pill is, but for most people who actually have lives outside the internet, you may need a refresher. The concept of the red pill is originally a reference to the Matrix movies, where by taking the red pill, you'll undergo a mental awakening about how the world actually works. Now, in the context of the movie, it's about realizing that machines have enslaved humanity and that we live in a simulation. But the red pill metaphor was most famously co-opted by the incel movement and other similar right-wing reactionary groups. But various other pills have sprung up, like the black pill, the blue pill, etc. These days, the pill shorthand has been beaten to death. It's reached the point of parody. I could say that I've been yogurt pilled because I just discovered I really like yogurt. That's kind of how people use it now. The bog pill is one of these parody pills. The joke being that these two goofy French celebrities are actually part of a global conspiracy, pulling the strings of the wealthy elite behind the scenes. By taking the bog pill, you've accepted them as your masters. Another part of the joke is that the brothers' appearance is not the result of plastic surgery, but rather because they are A, ancient Egyptian pharaohs, B, genetically engineered life forms, or C, aliens. When you
What would we do without 4chan? We would not have telols. That's what we would do.
take the bog pill, it transforms your face to match the brothers. For example, see The Weeknd in one of his recent music videos. Now, the bog pill got its start on 4chan's politics board, but eventually migrated over to Biz, which is the cryptocurrency board. Playing off the whole conspiracy aspect of the brothers, the joke is that the brothers have vast control over the entire stock market with a particular interest in Bitcoin. From what I can find, this coincides with this spike on the Google search terms graph in late 2017 to early 2018. Specifically, a YouTube channel known as Bizonacci began posting a variety of Bitcoin-related meme videos involving the brothers. The first of which was the following phrase.
Yes,
Bogdanov, he did it.
he bought,
He went all in.
dump it.
A reference to the concept of pump and dump market manipulation schemes. If there is one phrase most closely associated with the Bogdanovs, it is that one. Check the comments on my last video. The phone motif itself became the go-to template for a Bogdanov meme. If you get a phone call from the Bogdanovs, you better pick up, or else you can kiss your portfolio goodbye. To be clear, the brothers have no public link to Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. There is one instance where they have publicly mentioned Bitcoin during a TV interview from July of 2021. Not only do they claim to have contributed to Bitcoin's predictive code in the 90s, they also claim to have received 2 ancient physical Bitcoins from the anonymous founder, Satoshi Nakamoto. If you know anything about crypto, this is nonsense. They are trolling us. They are in on the joke, and they are bullshitting. Now this next part, I'm not making up. I swear to God. To counter the brothers, you have the champion of the gains, the green candles, Sminem. Who is Sminem? Sminem, jeez, Sminem, fuck. Oh my God. Okay, Sminem is a Russian teenager with large ears, pictured here, who became a huge meme on 4chan, in part because of his hilarious bootleg Eminem shirt, which just reads as Sminem. If you think you're missing part of the joke, you aren't. There's literally nothing more to it than that. 4chan just thought it would be funny to have Sminem be the yin to the Bogdanovs' yang. Bizonacci's channel features videos where the brothers and Sminem engage in Dragon Ball Z style fights within the stock realm. Bizonacci's last video is from November of 2018, and in all likelihood...
Wait. Wait, you mean there's a Dragon Ball Z video of these guys fighting? Did I hear that right? Okay. Okay, hold on. What the heck is going on? Oh, I can't see the mouse. The mouse is hidden. Oh, there it is. Okay, there we go. Okay. Let's just take a screenshot of this real quick. We're gonna finish the we'll finish the documentary here, and then we'll go look at those.
Engage in drag.
Because I worked in the fintech space for like the last 7 years, so I've seen this guy all over the place, but I had no idea this is the story behind the meme.
Dragon Ball Z style fights within the stock realm. Bizonacci's last video is from November of 2018, and in all likelihood, whoever ran the channel just got bored and stopped making videos. But to this day, you'll see a wave of bog pill memes every time cryptocurrencies see a surge in value. Now here's the part where I get serious for a bit. There are a lot of anti-Semitic tropes in these. Some subtle, some not at all subtle. And I imagine
It's 4chan,
that's
what'd you
part of
expect?
the intent. Dilute the egregious stuff behind several layers of irony and exaggeration until it becomes palatable enough to make the jump from 4chan to Reddit to YouTube. And trust me, if you go digging far back enough and you read the original 4chan threads, it's full of just absolutely vile stuff. Stuff I can't show here. In a vacuum, encountering them in the wild, I can see why they might be funny. But the first line of the quick rundown copy pasta is a straight up anti-Semitic dog whistle. This meme can't exist in a vacuum. So please, at the very, very least, be aware of who created these memes, where they came from, and think about what messaging they might be trying to push. I can't tell you what the Bogdanovs themselves think of the bog pill. Realistically, they probably don't fully understand it, and for their sake, I hope it stays that way. Up until now, we've covered the who, the how, the what, and the what the hell.
It's wild,
the
isn't it?
Bogdanov debacle. But we've yet to uncover the why.
The Bogdanov
Why go to
debacle.
so much trouble to get PhDs if not as part of an elaborate hoax or social commentary?
Because
After all,
trolling
what
is
their
a
game?
art.
By the time their TV show ended, Igor and Grichko were already millionaires who literally grew up in a castle, a household name in France, and best-selling authors with a devoted following. What benefit could they get from the grueling, decade-long process of earning themselves PhDs? We can't know for sure, but I have a pretty good guess. And I think this quote from John Barrow can point us in the right direction. They were very anxious to obtain PhDs very quickly. So the real question is, what was happening in 1991? God and Science is a 1991 best-selling book by the Bogdanov twins. This one in particular is based on their conversations with French philosopher Dr. Jean Guiton, and deals with the philosophical ramifications of physics, cosmology, and religion. This book is notable for being the subject of another lawsuit, but this time, the brothers were the defendants. Dr. Trinh Xuan Thuan, aka TXT, was a professor of astronomy at the University of Virginia. He sued them for plagiarizing his 1988 book, The Secret Melody and Man Created the Universe. Initially, the courts ruled in favor of TXT, but the twins don't give up that easily and countersued, alleging that TXT had actually plagiarized them, borrowing quotes from interviews they did with Jean Guiton and Carl Sagan in the 1980s. In 1994, 3 members of the Academy of Sciences ruled in favor of the brothers. Ultimately, the case ended with no conclusive judgment. By 1995, both parties had agreed to settle out of court. Both parties paid their legal fees, and TXT returned the initial settlement he won. Now, this plagiarism story did circulate when the scandal blew up in 2002, but because the details are so murky and the ultimate outcome of the case was ambiguous, many people opted to ignore it. Their PhD supervisor, Daniel Sternheimer, even went as far as to defend them on the plagiarism accusation, a step I don't think he'd be willing to take unless the evidence was convincing. The vast majority of civil cases end in an out-of-court settlement. This happens for a variety of reasons, with some of the most common being that both parties want to avoid a multi-year, drawn-out, and massively expensive legal battle. I've spent the better part of an hour showing you all of the underhanded tactics of the brothers, but I'm going to do a 180 here for just one moment. I don't think they plagiarized TXT here. The end result, though? A public lawsuit drew attention to an embarrassing detail the brothers were eager to cover up. The author biography for God and Science claimed that they were doctors, at a time when they very much were not. They blamed this mistake on their editor, and that they meant to say they were in the process of obtaining PhDs, which is plausible, but a deeper dig reveals that their editor is probably not to blame. Books of theirs from 1985 and even 1981 claim the same thing, that they had PhDs. Once is a mistake, twice is buffoonery, but 3 times is a pattern. I believe them when they say they always considered doing PhDs, but that TV had gotten in the way. But I'm also confident that this lawsuit accelerated their timeline. Now, originally, this was where the story ended. That was my big plot twist. I didn't expect it to go any deeper. After I uploaded part 1 of this series, I managed to get into contact with Alain Riazuelo via email. He's the man the brothers sued for copyright infringement, and he's done his fair share of investigation on the twins. We know that TXT is the reason why the brothers were in a hurry to get PhDs, but up until now it was unclear how they were able to get their foot in the door. After all, they were kicked out of their first school after only 2 years, because the faculty thought they were making a mockery of the PhD program. The answer lies with their second supervisor, Moshe Flato. I didn't speak much about Flato in part 1 because he passed away in 1998, a full year before their first thesis defense, and he never spoke publicly about the brothers. By all accounts, he was a well-respected expert in the field of symmetry groups, with a nearly 40-year legacy. And from an outsider's perspective, my thinking was that he was just doing his job. Igor and Grichka approached him, and he didn't give them any special treatment. He supervised them like normal students, up until his untimely passing. Alain claims that this isn't the full picture. This is a direct quote from my conversation with Alain. The story, as far as I could reconstruct it, is that Flato was unhappy with his career because, according to him, his colleagues did their best to prevent him to obtain prestigious positions, etc. Whether or not this actually happened, we know that Flato was Jewish, gay, wealthy, and was politically a right-wing voter. Even though I feel uneasy with the idea, we cannot avoid asking the question whether he at some point had been a victim of homophobia or anti-Semitism, or at least had reasons to suspect this. In any case, the most plausible explanation was that Flato wanted to get revenge on the system by allowing jokers to get PhDs. Earlier I mentioned that the brothers were convinced that this whole scandal was a politically motivated revenge feud. Specifically, in their eyes, they think that the French academic establishment was embarrassed to be giving PhDs to TV stars and was trying to sabotage them. And knowing what I knew back then, it sounded like a pair of narcissists trying desperately to save face. But now, maybe there was some truth to that. There was a politically motivated revenge plot, but they weren't the target, or the victims. They, at the expense of French academia, benefited because a bitter professor wanted to humiliate the institution that he felt had wronged him. When Flato passed away, Daniel Sternheimer was the logical choice to take over his students. They had met all the way back in the 1960s and had sustained a nearly 40-year publishing history together. If we can refer to Alain one last time, whether or not Sternheimer was happy to become the brothers' advisor after Flato's death is unclear to me. I spent 3 or 4 hours with Sternheimer 15 years ago and I could not figure this out for sure. But the fact that Flato, and consequently Sternheimer as well, wanted revenge on the system is established beyond any reasonable doubt, I would say. We've heard a lot from Daniel Sternheimer over the course of this series. Most of it wasn't positive. It's my hope that you'll go back and recontextualize his words and actions, knowing what you know now. Whether willingly or not, Daniel Sternheimer carried the torch of someone who meant a great deal to him. And maybe you've already guessed this next part. Flato and Sternheimer were more than colleagues. They were partners. They were life partners. I joked earlier about the rest of the world as nothing but pawns in the Bogdanovs' cosmic game. In truth, it was the opposite. TXT forced them into an embarrassing stalemate that exposed a major lie in their public personas. This led to them seeking PhDs, where they met Moshe Flato, who subsequently used them as pawns in a game being played way over their heads. Igor and Grichka are not a pair of grandmasters. They're a pair of middle fingers that were directed at French academia. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that what Flato did was ethical or even good, but what I am going to say is that maybe Alan Sokol does have a true rival after all.
Well, that was crazy. Now the question is, did he actually do this little sock puppet thing? He edited it in Vegas. Sock puppets by... Okay, somebody did the little sock puppet skit for him. Got a little like and subscribe. That's funny. Okay, well, that was just absolutely incredible. I had no idea. Isn't the internet an amazing place? And I'm trying to sign up for LinkedIn Premium because they're like, you'll get more views, but it's not taking my card, so I guess I'll do it tomorrow. Fuck it. I just gotta. I'm gonna apply to a couple more jobs. I looked like a good fit for that operations manager job. I just haven't used QuickBooks, but I sent him a message going like, look, I worked in the fintech space for the last 7 years. I'm sure it won't take me very long to learn how to use QuickBooks. Look at the rest of the resume. Give me a chance. What were we going to do? We were going to look at Biz. Let me type this up. B-I-Z. We're going to go look at the memes. Bizanachi. Okay. This is probably like a dead channel now. Oh, I've seen this one.
Continuité d'homme. Temporary bottom.
Let me put on the let's see here, how can we
Bottom.
let me put on the closed caption. There it is, yeah. That's funny.
Kill him. Transfer everything. And then find a notaire.
Oh, 4chan. Okay. Let's see the videos. What's the most popular? That was the one he bought. Oh, here we go. This is the DBZ one. It's funny because like I've had to look at charts like this for the last 7 years. Like, there's from working in the fintech space. This is kind of funny because this is the kind of stuff you would hear around the office all the time, especially with the people basically doing this. They do swing trading, so they just sit there and then they wait for it to hit. They have a plan, and it's not like mathematically. There's a guy that I worked with that. He had like this proven model that he would buy here and then sell here, and he just made money just slowly trading a little bit here, trading a little bit there, and he just bought low and sold high. I mean, it was that simple, but he was doing it based off of some sort of. I'm not that good with math, but he was, and he was very successful at it. So it's a hell of one way to make money. The other way, like for those of you that are like me, that are absolutely terrible with math. Now, this is not financial advice, but let me ask you a question. Okay. Let me hit the max button over here for the price of Bitcoin. Okay. Show me one other commodity, service, stock option that looks like that. You can't. It doesn't exist. It just, see that line? It just trends like that. It just trends. So I will, whenever I get hired again, I'm going to be putting all of my money, all of my spare cash, I'll be putting it into Bitcoin and just sitting on it. Like I'm not, cause if it's here now, where's it going to be in 10 years? You know what I mean? And I just sit on it. That's my retirement plan. To buy get all the Bitcoin I get my hands on, and just sit on it for a decade. I don't know if I'm close to getting a job. I'm applying to at least 5 different places a day. Maybe we'll up that to 10 starting next week. I talked with the recruiting agency last week, but the guy just kind of I don't know. I guess he didn't think I was a good candidate or something. Or maybe he was just busy. Maybe he didn't like my beard because it was down to here and then I trimmed it up. So maybe he didn't like the way I presented myself. Which is one of the reasons why I trimmed the beard. So, I have, I'm going to get in touch with a recruitment agency tomorrow. I went on their website, last week and I've applied to like 15 different positions there. And their process looks like, I'm supposed to be assigned some sort of, I don't know, caseworker, for lack of a better term. They're supposed to assign me a recruiter now that I've kind of done all of that. So we're gonna resume that process on Monday, and then I'm still putting my feelers out there. I'm gonna see if I can't. We'll look around for some other like recruitment agencies. I'm trying to get the LinkedIn Premium here, and then I'll actually flat out message recruiters. So the thing about recruiters, at least the IT ones, when you get to like where I'm at in my career, recruiters like to work with you because, they'll find you a place, and you're making low to mid 6 figures. But when you get signed on, they get like 10% of whatever your annual pay is going to be. So it's in the recruiter's best interest to find you a job, right? So that's what I'm trying to leverage the most up. I'm still applying to other places. I'm still applying myself. I'm on ZipRecruiter. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on a couple of these staffing agencies. But I like the idea. I've used recruiters as a hiring manager. So I would call up a staffing agency. Hey, I got to fill 3 positions. This is what I need. Do all the pre-screening for me. Like I want to interview them after their second interview, right? So just do all the heavy lifting for me, right? And send me what you think are the most viable based on these criteria. And they do that. And we hire them for like a contract for like 1 year. And each time we do that, the staffing agency gets paid a percentage based off of the annual salary of the individual hired. So, the recruiter lady loved talking to me because it's like, hey, I need like 3 more people. So she knew she was getting a payday as long as she, sent over the strongest candidates, and they certainly did. It's too bad that I had a bad experience with that guy last week. I'll try a different branch. I think I'll call like their Florida branch or something like that and see if I can't get somebody else to look at my resume with them. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it's like to try to find. I haven't needed to find a job in like 7-8 years. 8? No, because I left my last job for that job. So the last time I looked for a job was 12 years ago, something like that. So I don't know. I don't know how close I am. But I figure if I just keep at it, I keep doing this every day, it's bound to happen. It's not like I'm not employable. And push comes to shove, I'll just take some entry level thing to get some income going. Not that I want to do that, but I'm not above taking a lower paying job just to make ends meet. So, all right, we can close that. The job hunt continues. What happened with Nortel? I like this.
Big thank you to Nebula for sponsoring this video.
I feel like I'm learning something. I mean, the last video was just it was interesting to see where that meme came from. These cultural phenomenons we call memes. Now that we have the internet and ideas can propagate virally, enter the meme. It was actually a book. What was his name? Richard Dawkins wrote the book, and he coined the term meme, but he pronounced them memes. Nobody calls them memes. but he read his own. He did the narration for his own book in the audiobook version. So he calls it. You can, if you listen to the audiobook, you can call them memes. It's hilarious. Now, see this is cool. I mean, this is a little busy. But I like how you've got all of your information. So like his whole video essay right here, it's kind of laid out visually. And I like that. Like, that's cool. Like we see, like there's this graph. It starts in the 80s. It goes past, this has got to be like years. And then here's the different sizes of ships. We go from the 1860s. Yeah, look at that. Oh, okay. So we go from 1895. Billion spent. Nortel Networks. Cisco. Maybe get a Cisco certification real quick. Nah, I'd like to. Don't want to do something that techy. I'm tired of doing that hardcore tech stuff. I like the project management stuff better. All right, let's give this a shot. While I'm still looking for jobs. The job hunt continues.
When the Edmund Fitzgerald launched in 1958, it was the largest ship to sail on the Great Lakes, just 1 foot below the maximum allowed length of 730. The ship was named for Edmund Fitzgerald Sr., president of Northwestern Mutual out of Wisconsin, and spent 17 years hauling iron ore, setting its record of around 28,000 tons. Because of its imposing size, recognizable colors, and the music it played over its speakers, the boat became a local legend on both sides of the US-Canada border, and earned it the nickname the Titanic of the Great Lakes. During its history, the ship was not without its close calls or minor accidents, but each time it survived and continued on its journeys. And then came November 10th of 1975. After spending a little over a day sailing east on Lake Superior, the Fitzgerald and another ship, the Anderson, began to enter into rough waters. With wind speeds reaching almost 80 kilometers per hour, the captain of the Fitzgerald radioed the Anderson to say, "I have a bad list, I've lost both radars, and I'm taking heavy seas over the deck." They lost radio contact at 7:10 p.m. Minutes later, the Fitzgerald entered into a squall, a highly localized black storm cloud, at which point it disappeared from the Anderson's radar, and the ship and its 29 crew members were never seen again. The wreck was found 4 days later, 500 feet below the surface, a dozen miles outside Whitefish Bay. It had been torn into 2 gigantic pieces. The lifeboats hadn't been launched, suggesting that whatever took it down happened too fast to react. Although they're called the Great Lakes, their sheer size is such that they're more comparable to inland seas. Lake Superior is the largest of the 5, with enough volume to fit the other 4 lakes with room to spare. The weather conditions are often unpredictable and even violent. The waves on Lake Superior that day, particularly on the eastern side, reached an astonishing height of 11 meters. That's as tall as a 4-story house. With the Fitzgerald weighed down with 26,000 tons of cargo, water would have crashed down above the deck by over 4 meters. And although it's exceedingly rare, if the air pressure system was just right, a rapid frenzy of wind can generate a rogue wave, over twice the height of the surrounding crests, a column of water so imposing that it would register on a ship's radar. The exact mechanics of the sinking, to this day, are unknown. and widely disputed. Even the famous Gordon Lightfoot song captures the multiple possibilities with this lyric. They might have split up, or they might have capsized. They may have broke deep and took water. What exactly sank the Edmund Fitzgerald is a mystery that will never have just one satisfying answer. The best we can do is to analyze the wreckage and make our guesses. In April 1999, Nortel's general counsel, Clive Allen, dropped a bit of a bomb during a roadshow in Ohio. Now, Allen was set to retire in just over a month, and allegedly thought that his remarks would stay within his relatively small audience. He said that Nortel and other tech firms, quote, owe no allegiance to Canada, and alluded that Nortel may be considering a move to the States, unless the feds slashed its tax rates. Just because we were born there doesn't mean we'll remain there. Canadians shouldn't feel they own us. The comments from Allen, were not well received by Canadians. One 72-year-old shareholder said his remarks were gratuitous and nasty, and that nowadays everybody just thinks of themselves. I feel what Allen said was very offensive. Nortel may not owe allegiance to Canada in a legal sense, but it certainly benefited from its close ties to Canada. It was collaborations with the National Research Council and grants and loans from the government that helped kickstart the microelectronics boom in Ottawa, and Nortel had enjoyed years of R&D tax credits. One estimate in 1993 pegged the total tax credits at around $880 million, and it would be well over $1 billion by Y2K. NAFTA was supposed to have evened the playing field, give Canada a chance to expand into the US. But between 1985 and 2002, there had been roughly 10,000 foreign takeovers of Canadian companies, 6,400 of which were by US companies. 97% of the $140 billion Canadian that had flowed into the country had been spent on foreign takeovers. Was Canada open for business, or was it up for sale? And now the one Canadian company that had broken that cycle was talking about abandoning them. No one wanted a repeat of the Quebec Nordiques moving to Colorado, only to go on to win the championship the very next year. The very idea that Nortel would move down south was insulting, but not unprecedented. 50% of Nortel's sales were in the US, compared to just 10% in Canada. The majority of its employees were now American. The recession years under Jean Monty had seen their fair share of Canadian plant closures and relocations. Bramalea, London, Amherst, Canada saw a quarter of its workforce cut, many of them unionized, in favor of the cheaper labor available in countries like Mexico and China. And since '97, Nortel had been spending less and less money on political donations in Canada, instead sending more money to Democrats and Republicans with each passing year. Following the controversial comments, John Roth had to go into damage control mode, saying that Allen, quote, communicated very poorly and was not authorized to speak on behalf of the company. Instead, John Roth tried to reframe the issue.
Well, the big issue is that there's a huge incentive for basically people in the upper income. And a lot of our jobs that we have in Nortel basically pay very well. And there's a huge tax differential now between the take-home pay that somebody would experience if they had that job performed in Canada versus they performed the job in the United States. And I think the government really has to pay attention to the fact that a lot of upper income jobs are moving to the US. And this is going to reduce the Canadian tax base in time, and is going to basically impact the standard of living that we all enjoy here in Canada.
This wasn't about Nortel leaving to the US, but instead that Nortel was losing its best and brightest to US companies. On average, one Nortel manager a week was being poached by a US company in the year 2000. One Nortel executive was approached midway through his vacation in Greece and was flown out to Silicon Valley that day. They also offered to have his wife flown out so she could view a selection of hand-picked houses and see the various school districts. It doesn't matter that you work for the richest tech company in Canada. US tech has unfathomably deep pockets. One Silicon Valley recruiter explained it like this: optical networking equipment is not something a couple of guys in a garage can create overnight. There is no one in the valley who knows how to do optical transport. We have to import all our guys. Canadian engineers were being offered huge raises, stock options, and yes, even hockey tickets. That last one does sound like a sweet deal on paper, but keep in mind the hockey team was probably the San Jose Sharks. I've been assured that this is a very funny sports joke. The company behind that particular stunt was Optical Networks, of which Cisco was an investor. And
Bali, you asked about like the job hunt. So one of the other things that it looks like I need to do is, because I'm not currently employed. Well, I am actually, because I've got my own company. So I have my own LLC for making videos and stuff. But I'm worried that it'll look like it's very different from my fintech career. It's way different. But it looks like I'll show up in more searches and stuff because I currently have it as like active. So I'm gonna update my LinkedIn profile to include myself as the owner / creative project manager of my LLC, and I'm gonna emphasize my project management skills. I'm gonna say manage end-to-end video production projects, applying agile and waterfall methodologies to streamline workflows. Develop video essays analyzing project management frameworks, Scrum, Kanban, and the gaming industry, bridging creative and technical execution skills to highlight. Yeah, so clearly label it independent or part-time next to the company name if worried about overlap. Okay. Option 2 excluded. Only if it hurts your narrative. When to skip it. If your fintech resume is already strong and this distracts from your core expertise. If recruiters in your field heavily prioritize corporate experience only. Yeah, probably. Try adding it for 2 weeks and then track. Use the video essay to your advantage. Yeah, I should. All right, I'll hold off and I'll wait until I get this video essay out because I'm really drawing from all of my project management knowledge for that video essay. So I'll add that. I'll update my LinkedIn profile when the video is ready, because that way I can be like, oh, he has a video production company. Oh, look, he's made a video, and it won't just be the Skyrim video. It'll link to that games industry development technique explanation, basic video, basically. This is, I feel absolutely, this is terrible. The big ass tanker, like the biggest Titanic of the lake or whatever. And I guess this is where like probably what's the name of Edmunds Fitzgerald is the name of the ship, and it's just like some. Actually, hold on. I want to see. SS Edmund Fitzgerald. Here we go. Is an American Great Lakes freighter that sank in Lake Superior with the loss of the entire crew. Oh no. All 29 men. When launched on June 7th, 1958, she was the largest ship in North America's Great Lakes and remains the largest to have sunk there. She was located in deep water on November 14th, 1975 by U.S. naval aircraft detecting magnetic anomalies and found soon afterwards to be in 2 large pieces. For 17 years, it carried iron ore from mines to ironworks. Okay, at least it wasn't an oil spill. As a workhorse, she set seasonal haul records, often breaking her own record. Was known for piping music day and night over the ship's intercom while passing through the St. Clair and Detroit rivers, and entertaining spectators with a running commentary about the ship, her size, record-breaking performance, and DJ captain endeared Edmund Fitzgerald to boat watchers. Okay. Well, that's, at least it wasn't a big oil spill. That would have been terrible. Not that there's a bunch of oil over by the Great Lakes. What happened to the... Oh, it's right here.
Nortel was so infuriated by its antics that they filed a court injunction to stop them from stealing their employees. It had poached 19 employees.
Oh, hey, Vash, welcome to the stream. We got done with lunch. I'm applying to two or three. I need to find 2 more places to apply to. and then we're going to go review a script that I've got for a video. And the script basically, I know all these project management techniques and terms and stuff for related to software development because that's the field I've been working in the last 12 years. And I want to kind of get other folks to, I just want to educate the consumer about it. And I want to show off my project management knowledge. So it might even help me find a job. And then we've got, we're going to exercise a little bit. I heard this morning on some radio show that if you exercise 90 minutes, if you go from sedentary to exercising just 90 minutes a week, all-cause mortality goes down by like 15%. So I'm gonna get moving, and then we are this close to releasing the Skyrim music video. In fact, there's one thing left that I need to put my company's website at the end of the video and re-render it, and then if you're around, I'll preview it here one time, and then we'll upload it to YouTube and set it as a premiere. We'll have it premiere on like Friday or something, and that'll give me time to work on the other video essay that I want to have ready, and give me some time to push some other projects further along. I choose says, last time I watched you had hair, black Ray-Ban glasses, and you made YouTube videos. Hello. Hey, I'm still making YouTube videos. In fact, well, I'm unemployed right now. So I have set a personal goal to apply to 5 jobs, at least 5 jobs every day. And even though it's Sunday, I'm still doing it. I've already applied to 2. So I'm going to find 2 more. And then we'll move on to working on the next YouTube video. I can't wait to share it with y'all. In the meantime, I really like this guy's channel. His name is Bobby Broccoli. And he makes these interesting little documentaries. I don't know if a 90-minute documentary is little, but no, he's given me a bunch of ideas because I want to make a video essay kind of like this, but not on this subject, obviously. Hey, thanks, Vash. I gotta keep going, man. Oh, that's awesome. No, I'm glad you saw me. That's great. I'm trying to get back into it. I didn't even play any video games for I just started playing games again like in January. I think the first time that I actually loaded up a video game in like years. I loaded that one up. Where's one that I know, here, Stellaris. When was the last time I played Stellaris? May 3rd of 2021. Yeah. So I've just been in work mode. And I guess I still am, but I'm trying to incorporate some of this creative YouTube outlet stuff into my routine. Oh well. All right, let's let me finish applying to those jobs. I'm getting excited. I like talking to you guys about this stuff, but I got to stick to my goal. Give me like let's continue enjoying this documentary. It probably won't take me 90 minutes to apply to all those Nord jobs, so we'll see what's what. I'll shut up, let this keep going, and then I hope you folks stick around, and then we can or come back later, and we can talk about some of the YouTube stuff.
Employees in 11 months. Worse, Nortel was alleging that those employees had been targeted because of their knowledge of trade secrets. The last time Canada experienced a brain drain like this was right after the Avro Arrow. When the project was shut down in 1959, rather than converting the plant to civilian aircraft, 14,000 of Canada's best engineers were unceremoniously laid off. Guess who benefited from that? Those Canadians immigrated down south and went on to play a not-so-minor role in the founding of a little organization called NASA. John Roth was arguing that this saga was repeating. In his eyes, it was no wonder that highly educated Canadians were immigrating down south. They got higher salaries, better stock options, and their taxes were lower. Highly paid tech workers would be unlikely to require things like public housing, and job offers from Silicon Valley companies often came with cushy private health insurance. If Canada wanted to keep those PhDs north of the border, then they obviously had to cut taxes. That was his argument at least, but the validity of it is hard to evaluate. One study between 1997 and 2002 found that on average, 23,000 university-educated workers left Canada each year for the US job market. And in 1998, Statistics Canada confirmed that yes, a brain drain was occurring. However, it was small, much smaller than the one during the 50s and 60s, and more than offset by a brain gain from people immigrating to Canada, by a factor of 4. And on top of that, a later study from 2013 found that this brain drain was often temporary, with around 50% of graduates who moved to the US later moving back to Canada. There are clearly some additional, harder to quantify variables at play here. But here's the thing, this is about a narrative, and John Roth had a narrative that the media loved. Nortel had ballooned so spectacularly that it was worth more than the rest of its own parent company, BCE. His quotes were being published every other week in newspapers. He was on TV talking about the brain drain. John Roth was not simply a Canadian CEO, he was the Canadian CEO. His rhetoric was being echoed by the leaders of the two Conservative parties, who began to demand for further tax cuts. The culmination of this was a widely publicized feud with Finance Minister Paul Martin. The role of Finance Minister is generally one of the most sought-after cabinet positions, and Paul Martin was particularly influential. After coming in second behind Chrétien in the party leadership race, Martin had been biding his time ever since, stoking internal divisions within the party, and would successfully force out his boss in 2003. What this means is that John Roth was sparring with a future prime minister. Quote, "Canadian taxes are too high. They are driving out top talent, the Gretzkys of high tech." And Martin would hit back. Do I believe that some people leave Canada and that these are the kind of people we should not lose? Yes. Do I believe that they leave because of taxes? No. As much as the government tried to argue...
Oh, thanks, that's Hughes. You know what? Here, I want to reward you. I'm gonna give you the sneak peek. Let me just go ahead and do it. I'll give you the sneak peek. So let me make this change real quick. All right, you got me. We're gonna go back to. There we go. There we go. Give me 1 second. Let me move something around real quick. I don't want to dox myself. That's that project manager job. Yeah. Okay, I choose you. You're around. You ready? Are you ready to see the Skyrim music video? The music video that I promised back in 2012. Okay, and let me we need to put. Okay, all right, you're ready. I need. Okay, I want to do. We're gonna add one little end thing to this. Now, what I need to do is I need to put, and then I need. That's why we're gonna set the release date. We're gonna upload it, and then the premiere date's gonna be on Friday, and that'll give me time to update the website. So I got to put the link to the website. Oh, kind of like that. We just do Nexius Productions at gmail.com. Nexius Productions. Okay, that's good. How about? The tracking. There we go. Okay. Okay. Let's move this down. Nope. Down. I learned, one of the reasons I wanted to do this project was so I could learn DaVinci Resolve. I really liked Vegas, but the program's just dated. Like, this has so many new features. So many quality of life things. XaviusProductions.com. Okay. Let's have the drop shadow. Oh, there is no drop shadow. Delay type between each character. Delay. Okay. Let's do impact. I think red is kind of bold. I feel like I should put. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like I'm stuck. I should just do the video. Like I shouldn't. I'm thinking I don't want to put like a message at the end that's like, hey everybody, just forget it. Like let's just leave it with, hey, check out the website. And then what the mod list use were. Okay. All right, here, let's do it. Let's see what this looks like. Edit. Okay, so deliver right there. All right, so it's going to go to YouTube. I'm going to say final version, 1920 by 1080. Do the NVIDIA codec though. Okay. All right, render queue. Okay, render all. It's so amazing to me that I can render things this fast now. It's so great. Okay. So I'm going to get this, when this premieres, I got to get back in touch with Swifty. I've been so focused on my career and things like that. I lost my phone, and I lost his phone number, and he tried emailing me like a year and a half ago now, and I was just so busy at work I didn't get back to him in time. It's all my fault. That's okay. We'll get back in touch with him. Everybody's asking for us to do some content together, so be happy to do it. I also made this video as kind of like an old school callback. I'm trying to, people, everybody that's what I need to do. I need to put, like a thank you or something. And this is for the fans. That's what this video is for. All right, here we go. Let me mute. I'll mute the mic. Let's get rid of that. Let's show that. Okay. Let's hide the agenda, and I'll hide the webcam, and then I'll mute the mic. Here we go. Okay. What'd you think? Give me your first impressions. And I think I played the wrong version because that didn't have my website at the end of it. Final draft. Oh, it's final version. It should have been this one. All right, let's just look. Yeah. Yeah, look at that. I think that's good. Yeah. Does it need more work? You didn't like the music? Oh, well, that's where we differ. I really love that metal it's like a thrash metal version of the song. Sorry I didn't like it. Yeah, if you don't really like the song, how can you really like the music video? So I can't, that makes sense. I can't really blame you. Yeah, I really like that song. I can do another. I was thinking of doing another Skyrim music video, but it would be I'd basically do all like the Dawn Guard content because it's like darker with like werewolves and vampires and all that kind of crap, and I could sing like a Marilyn Manson cover. There's this song called "Eat Me, Drink Me" that I think would go really, really well to a Skyrim music video. Hey, I choose. That's okay. I appreciate what you didn't say was you didn't like you said the cuts are nice. So the editing's good. It's just not the music, which is great. That because I'm the one who I did all the editing. I didn't play the song. So you like all my stuff. You don't like the other guy's stuff. That's fine. I appreciate you being honest. I'm always looking for constructive criticism, and I get that you can't please everybody. You gotta, but yeah. Okay, so you got your preview. Let's go back, and that's for and thanks for coming in and hanging out and saying hi. That means a lot to me. I want to continue to make more music videos like that and kind of give back to the community because it means something to me when you folks are like, oh, this is great, really liked your videos, really meant something. That's just that's something money can't buy, basically. Okay, what's wrong here? Why is this Oh, there we go. Okay, let me apply to a couple more places, two or three more places, and then we'll move over to working on the video essay.
Against it, politics is about optics. In February 2000, Paul Martin introduced what amounted to $58 billion in tax cuts and a significant overhaul to the tax bracket system. With an election becoming increasingly likely as the year dragged on, Paul Martin delivered a killing blow to the conservative platforms by unveiling a second mini-budget.
Even after it wasn't really, I didn't really break up with John. I just, I guess it could, that could be seen that way. Yeah, when John and I never had a falling out. I had a bunch of problems. It wasn't anything Swifty did. But no, I'm glad to know that you were, keeping an eye out for me. I was in a bad way for a long time. I had a bunch of health problems, and because mind and bodies linked together, I had a bunch of mental problems. I had a bunch of health and mental problems. I was just a mess. But I think I'm finally better. So trying to make content, or I'm as good as I'm gonna get. Let's put it that way. And just trying to make content again. Because I don't know, it's rewarding for me. I like doing this. I want to keep doing it. If I can make a living doing it, I'd do it right now. I wouldn't be applying for jobs. But that's it's gonna remain a side gig until I can. I don't know. I just my fintech career is really good. I can make a good amount of money doing project operations management stuff. Though I would much rather just make content for a living. So as soon as I can make enough to pay the bills on, that's probably when I'd quit my day job.
In October, which added even more cuts and sped up many of the changes promised in February. By one-upping the opposition on taxes and with healthcare as a further wedge.
Oh, thanks to choose. It should. I got to. I take it a day at a time, and I schedule. I write things down and I schedule them. I force myself to go through. The process of like apply to 5 jobs every day, that kind of stuff. And it's just, it's just a matter of time, I think, unless my, something's seriously wrong with my resume or some other extraneous thing that I haven't thought about. But I'm doing everything I can, and I'm sure it will work out. I'm sure it will.
Issue, the Liberals cruised to another huge majority in November of that year. John Roth had gone toe-to-toe with the future Prime Minister, and he had won. For this saga, Time Canada named him Canadian Newsmaker of the Year. Although most Canadians were focused on changes to the middle tax bracket, for the John Roths out there, the real headline was the corporate tax rate, which would be dropped from 28% to just 21% over the next 5 years. Employee stock options also got a revamp. They now had a built-in tax deferral clause, meaning you wouldn't owe taxes until you sold your shares. And of course, the capital gains tax, which as we saw last time contributed significantly to the Canadian stock craze. It started the year at 75%, but was down to 66% in February. This would have been the end of it, but then the Tory government on Ontario said, hey, we're going to lower ours to 50%. Not wanting to be outflanked on taxes in an election year, Paul Martin said, fine, we'll do it first. And so by October, he had slashed it again and brought it down to 50%, which is where it stands to this day. In a global financial market that was so often dominated by American companies, John Roth had done everything he could to level the playing field. But still, Nortel lacked one key trick that Lucent and Cisco had access to. And John Roth had a plan for that as well.
Analog and DFT, how much better can it be? Anesthetic on the floor, I can take it anymore.
I don't think I want to pay this anymore.
To understand the root of Nortel's problems, you have to go back to a PR incident in late 1998. See this plunge in price? It was caused by 12 words. The recent Bay Networks purchase was not an immediate slam dunk. The company had not been without its own issues. It had been formed from the merger of 2 other tech companies who had overlapping product lines, and some of its senior employees had jumped ship. At $9.1 billion, many observers thought that Nortel had way overpaid. And by fall 1998, it wasn't clear if Bay was helping Nortel's cash flow. Nortel had just released some earnings numbers that didn't factor in the Bay purchase, even though the 2 companies had already merged. At their annual investor meeting in late September, Nortel's then CFO, Wes Scott, got up on stage to try and clear up the confusion. Referring to their projected annual growth of 14%, he said something to the effect of, in the high teens with Bay included, and low teens without Bay. Technically, this was not new information, and yet he hadn't even finished his sentence and a room of 500 people had entirely vacated. All the analysts had left to tell anyone who would listen to cash out of Nortel and to do it fast. In the days that followed, Nortel lost 20% or $9 billion Canadian in value. Since announcing the Bay purchase, they were down by 50%. One audience member remarked, it was only 12 words. That works out to $750 million per word. It was a hard lesson for Nortel. This stock price crater had undone basically all the gains that had been made under John Roth's tenure as CEO. He was approaching his threshold. The lesson here was that frank honesty is bad for the stock price. You gotta give investors only what they want to hear. Wes Scott was booted from the CFO role early the next year. He would be replaced by Frank Dunn, a longtime ally of John Roth. From this incident onwards, Nortel would concoct a new type of financial reporting: earnings from operations. I already know that for most of you watching this, your eyes just glossed over. I get it, it sounds like an Econ 101 term, something straight out of an accounting textbook. But it's deceptive. These 3 specific words, in this specific order, is not something you can find in a textbook. It's an invention entirely unique to Nortel, a smokescreen that hid just how bad things were from investors. So there's this thing in the US called GAAP, right? Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. Essentially, a big group of accountants, the FASB, come together and make a set of standardized rules for reporting a company's finances. It makes it so you can compare different companies on a level playing field and helps investors make informed decisions. It's not technically a law, but if you're a publicly traded company, the SEC can issue fines if you don't follow GAAP, and even private companies tend to follow it so they can get loans from banks. Now, Canada at this time had its own version of GAAP. Nortel, which was owned by a Canadian parent company at the time, was required to follow Canadian GAAP, which was frustrating for Nortel because it meant they couldn't take advantage of the highly controversial Opinion 16, aka the pooling rule. When you buy a company, you're paying for two types of assets, tangibles and intangibles. Tangible assets would be physical stuff, like offices, factories, equipment, employees, stuff that has a clear dollar value. The intangibles, though, are harder to quantify. This might be brand recognition, customer relationships, or in this new exciting .com era, the future potential of R&D. If I buy a company for $10 million, but they only have $3 million in tangible assets, that means I paid a premium of $7 million. This premium is called goodwill, and goodwill has to be recognized on your balance sheet, subtracting from your revenues as a rapidly depreciating asset. Here's where the controversy comes in. Way back in 1970, the FSAB had drafted Opinion 16, a rule that dictated how companies report expenses after a merger. When two companies of equal size merge together, say Exxon and Mobil, they take all their shares and combine them into one big pool. The assets have been combined, no money has traded hands, and so it doesn't count as goodwill. However, by the 90s, corporations realized that the pooling rule could be abused. It didn't just work for a merger of two equals. It could be applied to one company buying another. A big company prints new shares and swaps them with the employees of the small one. There is no pooling taking place here. Shares have traded hands. But because those employees were now part of the big company, the pooling rule technically applied. As long as you paid with shares instead of cash, the pooling rule effectively made the acquisition free. It was like goodwill never existed. Now, the FSAB wasn't dumb. They realized what was happening and wanted to scrap pooling as early as 1996. The problem was that they faced intense lobbying efforts from tech companies, who sunk millions into the pockets of Republicans and Democrats, particularly in California. The tech sector sunk around $40 billion in political contributions in just the year 2000. Despite this, the FASB continued to fight back, and eventually managed to get the pooling rule scrapped, a change that would take effect on January 1st of 2002. Of the big three telecom companies, only Cisco could make use of pooling, and it took advantage every chance it got. Nortel couldn't because it was stuck following Canadian GAAP, and Lucent couldn't until late 1998. This was a condition of its spin-off from AT&T, that it couldn't use pooling for the first 3 years. You can see how this would be endlessly frustrating for Nortel and Lucent. Just 3 months after their ban on pooling expired, Lucent made its first major purchase in January 1999 with Ascend Communications. Now it was just Nortel without a free money glitch. So what did Nortel do? They did it anyway. The thing is, there is nothing preventing a company from publishing their GAAP numbers and then also publishing a different set of numbers that make their company look better. So long as you clearly define which ones are GAAP and which ones aren't, there is nothing illegal about that. You could bury them in the fine print, or you could publish your annual report on a big news day so no one pays attention. This type of creative accounting fueled the entire .com bubble. You had startups worth billions of dollars on the stock market and yet had no products and no revenues. They were just offices with a few computers, a website, maybe a foosball table. The 1990s were the wild west of investing, and it became almost impossible for financial analysts,
Well, the same thing happened with crypto 10 years ago.
much less the average person, to decipher the dozens of different GAAP versus non-GAAP numbers. It was like apples versus oranges versus prime rib steaks. To be clear, what Nortel was about to do was not unique, and it was not illegal. Nortel was just doing it at an unimaginable scale. And so, under the new CFO Frank Dunn, Nortel released their annual report for 1998. In it, the cost of the Bay Network's buyout was simply not factored in to the headline numbers. Buried at the bottom were the GAAP numbers. What would have been a $569 million loss under GAAP was a $1 billion profit under Nortel's nonsense numbers. Here's another headline. Revenues up 22%, up to $4.4 billion. But buried at the end of the paragraph is the GAAP number. The quarter actually saw a loss of $470 million. As Nortel continued to buy around one new company a month, their financial situation continued to worsen. Paying a premium in shares costs way more than paying with cash. Shares are inherently more risky. Their value can go up and down at the drop of a hat. A company about to be bought out is going to demand a big premium. Cutera, for instance, had been valued at around $68 million the year prior, only to be bought by Nortel for $3 billion. I have a hard time believing they went up in value 40 times in just 1 year. Of the nearly $22 billion spent on goodwill, only $450 million of it was paid using cash. One estimate by analyst Al Rosen says that if they had paid with cash, Nortel could have saved $13.4 billion. Were these acquired companies even profitable? Were they bringing in new revenue? Nortel made it impossible to tell. They weren't kept as distinct subsidiaries. They were absorbed in the existing corporate structure. Their revenues all mixed together in an opaque sludge. And the acquisitions were hardly efficient. Many product lines overlapped. Nortel now had 2, maybe 3 divisions working on competing products. Of course, all of this doesn't matter so long as the stock price goes up. As we saw earlier, Nortel's already distorted presence on the Toronto Stock Exchange allowed it to exploit these buyouts to further inflate its share price. As long as the stock stayed steady and the orders from customers kept coming in, they would never feel the cost of those acquisitions. And here's the kicker. Executive bonuses weren't paid according to GAAP numbers. They were paid according to Nortel's custom accounting. By selling his shares in August 2000, John Roth cashed out for $36 million. If we go by his yearly salary, it would have taken him 30 years to earn what he had just made in 1 day of trading. In the 4 years he was CEO of Nortel, he raked in around $130 million. And during his 4 years as Nortel's CEO, Nortel hadn't posted a single profit.
I gather the results might have been better if you'd been able to fulfill more orders. How are you going to deal with those bottlenecks?
Well, we've been working that very aggressively, as you might imagine. This is one of the problems you'd like to have from time to time, but we don't want it to last too long.
Success a nightmare? It may seem that way if you don't have the right tools to handle it.
The dot-com bubble had burst on March 28, 2000. All those internet startups had finally burned through their venture capital money. The tech-heavy NASDAQ index begins to plummet. That year, 14 dot-com companies ran Super Bowl ads for around $2 million each. And later that year, 2/3 of those same companies went bankrupt. The business models never took off, and only the most hardened players, the Amazons, the eBays, managed to stick around. Logically, you would think that when the dot-com bubble burst, the telecom bubble would immediately follow. But that's not quite what happened. Just because a bunch of California yuppies in their parents' garages couldn't put together a business plan doesn't mean the sky is falling. The Nortels, the Ciscos, the Lucents were planning for the future here. Just like the race to build the early cross-continental railroads, this was a race to install the world's fiber optic networks. If you build it, they will come. People were still going to need the internet. The three-way race continued well into the summer. By July, there were rumors of yet another massive buyout. Nortel was in talks to acquire Corning. Corning is the company when it comes to glass. They were the ones who made the glass for Thomas Edison's light bulb. These days, they were known for mass-producing the thin strands of glass used to transmit binary laser pulses, fiber optic cables. The magnitude of this deal cannot be overstated. It wasn't meant to be, however. Rumors of the deal caused Nortel's stock price to rocket up even higher, causing Corning's investors to panic, and the deal was abandoned. This is the absolute peak that Nortel will reach. $124.50. They will never get back above this line. Go ahead and take in the view, because it will only last a few weeks. Nortel had spent the past year as the darling of the Canadian stock market, but if you go looking for them, you can find a handful of Nortel skeptics who predicted the inevitable fall with stunning accuracy. Al Rosen had been one of the first to raise the alarm bell on the earnings from operations nonsense, and he advised his clients to stay well away from Nortel. Ross Healy was notable for going on live TV and predicting a drop to $8 per share by September. But it was Paul Sagawa who truly understood the danger that Nortel was in. He had spent months talking to dozens of telecom companies, asking anyone who would pick up the phone. The answers he got didn't just spell doom and gloom for Nortel, it predicted a black cloud for the entire telecom sector in 2001. The demand for internet traffic was growing, absolutely. but nowhere near the levels that market analysts were pulling out of their asses. One consulting firm predicted that between 1999 and 2003, you'd see traffic go from 350,000 terabits to 15 million. That is a 10 times increase per year, 4 years in a row. Author Douglas Hunter points out that the telecom industry was a near perfect analog to the race between British railway companies in the early 1800s. Companies often ran parallel tracks to the same destinations, but there simply weren't enough passengers to use all of them. What happened next was mass bankruptcy and consolidation of the rail industry into just a few powerful players. Nortel was still the darling of Bay and Wall Street, but its detractors had begun to knock a few dollars off its share price by the fall. And with its share price slumping, Nortel had to slow down on its acquisition spree. After closing 2 more deals in early October, there wouldn't be another for several months. But John Roth was defiant as ever. It isn't that Nortel is overvalued, it's maybe that everything else is undervalued. Late October was critical for Nortel. Investors were eagerly awaiting their third quarter numbers, and hopes were high. But October 25th turned out to be a disastrous day. Nortel was going to miss analyst expectations by 1 cent per share. It was an underperformance just barely below expectations, but the market is unforgiving. Nortel loses $80 billion in 1 day. The TSE has its worst day in 13 years because of it. So many Nortel shares are being traded that it brings down the TSE's computer systems and traders have to go through Wall Street instead. By the end of the week, $120 billion had been simply erased from existence. And Nortel
anyway, these weird financial tricks. It's like $20 billion is gone. It's like, well, was it ever really there? Was it ever really there? Because if you got a company that's worth $500 billion and you sell it for $5 million, well, it's worth the price it was sold at, if you ask me. I don't know. I shouldn't start arguing this accounting stuff. I have no domain knowledge.
Fell from 32% to just 24% of the TSE 300. Autumn was a chilly wake-up call after a blistering hot summer season. October 25th is the biggest single-day loss in Nortel's history. But as dire as that sounds and looks, it was not the end of the world. It's important to take a moment and get some perspective. This graph is so warped, so blown out of scale, that every number that isn't this one feels like a colossal failure. But every time that Nortel has fallen down in the past, its stock has climbed its way back up. Think about how the people who bought the dip in 1993 feel now. If you bought here, Jean Monty quadrupled your shares by the time he left. And if you bought the dip in 98, John Roth multiplied your shares by 9 times. Do you still doubt it? Are you going to miss out again? Individual investors loaded up again. Pension plans loaded up. Nortel was nothing if not resilient. You couldn't say the same for Lucent, who had spent much of their fourth quarter of 2000 stepping on a bunch of rakes. They revised their earning predictions twice, down from 24 to 18 cents per share, losing them almost $8 from their stock price. Because of this, CEO Richard McGinn was fired by the board. Then on November 21st, they admitted that they overstated their sales by $125 million, lopping another 2 cents per share from their targets. Can you imagine that? You have thousands of accountants and you can't even get your own numbers right? Embarrassing. Since late September, it had lost 56% of its value, dragging down Nortel and Cisco with it. During the same period, Nortel was down 48% and Cisco 36%. It was bad news for all telecom companies, but Lucent had fallen a long way since their record-setting IPO. It had tried to grow too much, too fast. All those companies it had gobbled up to compete with Nortel and Cisco were being ejected again. It had spun off 2 major divisions as Avaya and Azure Systems. Nortel was smugly watching by as Lucent tripped over its own feet. If this was still a race, it was now only between Nortel and Cisco. On November 30th, John Roth was given the honor of ringing the bell that signaled the start of the trading day on Wall Street. Although it tends to be an honor given to American CEOs, that day it was Nortel's 25th anniversary of being listed on Wall Street. John Roth gave a speech later that day, and given the circumstances, he was well within his rights to be a little petty. Quote, "We grew 40% this year. We'll grow 30 to 35% next year. A lot of people would like to have that problem. Nortel does not have a problem." This infamous quote would haunt Nortel for years to come. By the end of December, John Roth had been awarded Canadian Newsmaker of the Year, as well as Canadian CEO of the Year. The stock recovered over the holidays thanks to an overall market rally in the new year, and it seemed that Paul Sagawa's prophecy of disaster had been oversold. But then, Cisco blinked. In January, CEO John Chambers had finally spoken into existence the words that every investor feared. Quote, "Is the economy slowing?" Absolutely. For Cisco, the first quarter of 2001 was going to be, quote, "a little more challenging." Cisco wasn't ringing any alarm bells yet, but it was clear that they weren't going to promise the moon either. But on February 6th, Cisco completely throws in the towel. It announced to investors that it would be earning 1 cent less per share than initially predicted. Their stock price is pummeled and loses 20% in just a few days. By April, they'll be down by half. Meanwhile, in the background, Nortel had just quietly cut 4,000 jobs. There is no official public statement. It's not until January 10th that the media hears rumors of job losses at Nortel, at which point Nortel unleashes a PR offensive. Any sales deal or new customer was broadcasted by the PR team. Didn't matter how small the deal was, any good news was championed like a monumental saving grace. To quote analyst Ross Healy, it was like the Hudson's Bay Company reporting the sale of every 31-inch television set. There was so much good news pouring out that bad news had no room to breathe. Then for good measure, a Nortel spokesperson says the reporting of layoffs is exaggerated. You see, they're cutting jobs in slower divisions so that they can hire more in faster growing divisions. If you think about it, by the end of the year, we'll have hired back the same number of people. Those aren't layoffs, that's just strategic reallocation. The spin seemed to work, and the markets rewarded Nortel by stopping their slide. 2001 Nortel was going to be meaner and leaner. But then, there were some disturbing reports. One internet company, ICG Communications, had just declared bankruptcy. Although there was no public record of any specific dollar amount deal with Nortel, Nortel had been listed as one of their technological partners. Soon after, Bookham Technologies announces that they're reducing orders from Nortel. On its own, it's a neutral statement. Maybe Nortel had found a better supplier. But enough about that. We've got a major piece of good news again. Another acquisition, the first since the October crash. Nortel was buying a laser division for undersea fiber optics from JDSU, $2 billion worth of shares. The deal is set to close on February 13th. The news that would come just 2 days later would trigger several class action lawsuits. Earlier in February, there had been a meeting in North Carolina. The CFO, Frank Dunn, is in attendance. He's getting updates from division heads on their sales forecasts. The first to speak was Greg Mumford. Sales are slowing down in the optical division. Frank is momentarily shaken. Then he lets
I got a response back from one of these folks for like an instant interview. So let me go do a bio break real quick, and we might have to mute things for a second here. See what this is all about. But be right back, and we'll keep this going, and I'll let you folks know what's going on.
Other people speak. Wireless, it's going down. Enterprise, down. Everything is going down. Quest, MCI, all of their customers that had promised a certain amount of business were now having to cancel orders because they lacked the money. Most of those deals had been done using vendor financing. Nortel promised deep discounts and loans in exchange for their business, but they couldn't even pay for those. And yet Nortel had already recorded those as sales even though they hadn't been paid for yet. Nortel switches were sitting in warehouses, still on the pallets they were delivered on, with nowhere to go. By some estimates, these heavy-duty fiber networks were only supporting 7 to 14% of their total capacity. There just wasn't enough internet activity to warrant the existing orders, much less any new ones. Nortel was about to drive off a cliff. Scratch that, they had run off the cliff months ago. This was the moment where Wile E. Coyote looks down and he realizes he's about to fall. Stunned silence in the boardroom. How had they missed this? How had no one seen this coming? In reality, lower-level managers in Nortel had known about this problem for months. In San Diego, September 2000, Tim Dempsey, an HR exec, was running a leadership workshop. All of the managers are pulling him towards their table and begging him to listen. You gotta tell John. Tell John what exactly? The marketing numbers aren't real. What's fake exactly? Peel the layers and you'll see that the assumptions are that end users will buy networks from each of our customers. End users only need one network each. All the numbers are inflated. These warnings never made it to John. Instead, they were suffocated by the rigid bureaucracy of the management hierarchy. John Roth had surrounded himself and stuffed the board with yes men. While he was busy telling investors what they wanted to hear, his own executives were doing the same to him. Dave House, the former CEO of Bay Networks, only stuck around at Nortel for about a year before he left. But after just 6 weeks, he shared with Tim Dempsey his opinion on the rot that infected Nortel. I have never seen a bigger group of liars in my life. I am astounded that you don't tell each other the truth. There's a culture here to lie to each other, to protect your turf, to protect your ego, to protect your business, to protect your customer relationships. To protect what? I don't know. But you don't tell each other the truth. In this moment, Frank Dunn doesn't understand all this. He just knows he has to make a phone call. John Roth is not in the building. He's not even on the same continent. John Roth would later describe his shock at the news as comparable to when he first heard about the attack on the World Trade Center later that year. A press release was being drafted, and it would go public in a little over a week. On February 8th, Nortel's CTO, William Ha, abruptly leaves, cashing in his stock options, although mostly at a loss. He sees the writing on the wall. Soon, Don Smith, president of Optical Internet Solutions, also leaves. Nortel won't publicly mention these departures until a week later. On February 15th, it seems like just another trading day on Wall Street. The regular trading day ends without incident at 4 p.m. Just minutes after the closing bell, though, internet trading forums start going berserk. They've just been fucked. Nortel has issued a press release, and they've changed their forecast. Nortel was not going to hit its target. That much was clear. When Nortel missed their earnings by just 1 cent per share last October, they lost 25% of their stock price in 1 day. When Cisco missed their earnings by 1 cent per share, the market slaughtered them. And of course, Lucent had their traumatic fall from grace when they had to lop off 2 cents per share, and their stock was nearly cut in half.
Oh, never mind. Oh, this looks like it's like, oh, it's like they're trying to scrape information for their AI, is what this instant interview thing looks like. They're just saying they have jobs, and then they're scraping people's data. Screw that. Yeah, I apply, and then and there's nobody doing an interview on a Sunday. See, this is why I want to talk to the recruiters to avoid crap like this. I haven't been on ZipRecruiter in a couple days. I should probably go see if anything's opened up on ZipRecruiter too. Oh, well, the hunt continues. This is what it's like. I'm just a normal Joe like everybody else. Just running the rat race right there with you.
The question was, where in this range will Nortel's correction be? Nortel's original target was earnings of 16 cents per share. And this was their correction. They didn't just underperform, their projected gain had turned into a projected loss. The next day, so many Nortel shares are dumped that it crashes the Toronto Stock Exchange several times. Nortel is cut by 33%. $44 billion is just gone. The Financial Times summed it up in just one sentence. It's a wonder there is any red ink left in Canada.
We've known for some time that job cuts were coming, but we didn't know where.
Now we do. Today, Nortel Networks announced 950 more layoffs in Canada, 750 right here in Ottawa.
Robert, more than half of Canada's 24,000 Nortel employees work here in the capital region. And tonight, most of them are in the dark.
At first, it starts slow.
Don't see that. Yeah, with Plantier. Yeah, who knows?
Last November had small layoffs. Employees assumed it was just routine, the bottom 5% being cut loose. Nothing out of the ordinary. It was only fair. Now, though, rating systems began to emerge. Everyone had to be ranked on a scale of 1 to 5. But there was no minimum threshold you could meet, no level of productivity that could save you. Someone had to be a number 1. Someone always had to be at the bottom. And then the paranoia sets in. You don't want to be a number 1. You need to set yourself apart. Maybe you're the laser guy around the office. That's your thing. Before, you probably would have taught the new guy the basics, get him up to speed. It would make your job easier. But now, that would just make you replaceable, disposable. That's your thing. You need that to be your thing, because hoarding knowledge is the only thing that's going to save you from being a number 1. Initially, Nortel had begun announcing layoffs based on location, but soon, that stopped. Instead of knowing up front, you simply had to wait and see. One man had packed up his things and moved from Vancouver to Ottawa for a job offer, only to find out it had been rescinded by the time he got there. Before the bubble, Nortel had several divisions like Extreme Voice, Extreme Data. If your group had Extreme in the name, it was almost guaranteed you were gone. Nortel was riddled with bloat. The acquisition spree had been made hastily and without any concern for overlapping product lines. You might have 2 or even 3 competing teams whose products overlapped, and only one would ever make it to market. Tim Dempsey recalls an HR exec bragging at a meeting that Nortel was world-class at downsizing, like it was something to be proud of, that Cisco's refusal to downsize was a weakness. People would congregate in the bathrooms just to talk about who might be next. Employees would avoid being at their desk out of fear of having the phone ring, of seeing their manager's name show up on caller ID. One day you'd look in the calendar and see a huge meeting room booked by your manager and someone from HR you didn't recognize. It would always be scheduled at a weird time of day. Security was always nearby in case someone didn't take the news well. Sometimes they wouldn't even say your name aloud. They didn't even afford you that dignity. Your name would be flashed on screen in a PowerPoint jammed in between a dozen other names. Sometimes the entire product team would be called into an auditorium, and you'd be told, if you didn't attend the earlier meeting, you've unfortunately been let go. Managers often knew days ahead of time. Company rules forbid them from giving advance warning. Sometimes, though, they would break the rules, do the bare minimum, and tell people to start looking for jobs. For some, being fired was almost a relief. To have to continue on at Nortel not knowing if you'll make it through the next week could be agonizing. Quote, their whole life is in a stall pattern right now. The culture was changing too. No more free snacks and meetings. Managers stopped buying rounds of beers at the pub. Something that used to be benign, getting Nortel to sponsor your charity golf team, was now being denied. In March, managers could no longer award bonuses outside of designated periods. All exceptions had to be run up to the president for approval. Every single business trip had to be approved by your boss's boss's boss. Company cell phone? Nope, give it back. At the very least, they bent the rules for the company's softball league. Former employees were allowed to keep playing. The emptiness was pervasive. Massive parking lots, which used to take 5 whole minutes to walk across, now only needed 1 or 2 rows. Whole buildings were now ghost towns. Entire floors were just empty. One of the few benefits of this emptiness was that Nortel would let laid-off employees use their old cubes to job hunt for an entire month. One final kindness. And then 9/11 happened, and the already tough job market dried up even more. 60,000 people had been let go, and Nortel's Canadian cousins were just collateral damage. JDSU cut 50%, 16,000 jobs, and was moving its headquarters to San Jose. Newbridge had been bought out by French company Alcatel. Bookham's CEO said that Nortel very nearly killed them. Corel, which had taken on Microsoft in the software space, had been pummeled into submission. The dream of Silicon Valley North felt like it was over. Nortel is ubiquitous here. You could throw a stone into almost any office and you'd likely hit someone who used to work there. But there's almost a missing decade. This is something I've observed firsthand in my working life. You have my parents' generation, still working in tech after surviving round after round of layoffs. And then you'll see plenty of people my age, new grads, interns, people still in school. Where did the middle go? Where are the youngest Gen Xers and the oldest millennials? A Statistics Canada study found many years later that of the high-tech workers laid off in this period, 4 out of 5 of them did not go back into tech. 2 in 5 of them left the city altogether. Those who were laid off went in every direction. Some took a year off and spent time with family. Others immediately went back to search for jobs in an increasingly dire market. Those willing to gamble even more went out and founded startups on the back of napkins while they commiserated at a local pub. Others completely changed career paths. Some became photographers, contractors, farmers. Others opened up cafes. Brian Beattie was laid off from Nortel and later became a bus driver. He said that even carrying around up to 72 children wasn't nearly as stressful as working at Nortel was. Others, like Roxanne McLaren, had to have difficult conversations with their children. They wouldn't be able to send them to college that year. When the layoff started, Roxanne said it was like a day full of deaths. Neither of my parents worked for Nortel, but they had plenty of friends who did. My dad worked with people close to retirement who had to completely reschedule their life after losing much of it on the stock market. Hundreds of thousands of dollars gone in an instant. My family was very lucky. Making ends meet was not something I ever had to consider as a kid. Although my mom got laid off twice, my dad kept his job. I was too young to realize what had happened at the time when my mom was laid off for a second time. But I was just happy that now she could pick us up after school. 2001 to 2003 had been brutal. It had been agonizing, but it was not the end. Nortel, despite everything, had come out the other side. Canada's industrial titan was only bruised, not broken. It just needed a good captain to get it back on course. That was the question on everyone's mind. Who is going to replace John Roth?
One slip is one too many.
I don't think I've ever had 2 days that were the same. Everything changes, by the minute.
The stunning forecast reversal in February of 2001 initiated a single-day loss of 33%, or $44 billion in market cap, completely gone. The whole industry was undergoing a nuclear winter. Lucent stock had cratered by 99% from its peak and had now fired 2 CEOs. Even the prestigious Bell Labs was embroiled in scandal, as one of its physicists was accused of faking dozens of Nobel-worthy research papers. Cisco, the most resilient of the big three, was still down 86% from its peak. However, it was Nortel's blind arrogance as it entered the dark cloud of 2001 that made its fall from grace the most dramatic. Between its peak in July 2000 and its lowest point in October of 2002, Nortel stock had lost 99% of its value. $400 billion in market cap, just gone, losing it the title of Canada's most valuable company. It was now worth less than it was at the start of the 80s. And in late 2002, the Toronto Stock Exchange would replace the TSE 300 index with one that was far less exploitable. Its place in the Canadian economy would never be the same. 2 months after his disastrous forecast, John Roth announced his retirement, or more accurately, the announcement of the future announcement of his retirement. Although you might assume the board was forcing him out, it was actually the opposite. John had always planned on leaving in 2001. He said as much when he interviewed for the job. He wanted out before age 60. John Roth, despite everything, was still somehow viewed as the most competent person to fix this mess. The board desperately needed him to stay on because the truth is, the line of succession was in chaos. Reportedly, John had taken his hands off the wheel sometime in summer 2000 to give his handpicked successor some practice. COO Clarence Chandran. Nortel had nearly lost Clarence in '96 when a local rival had tried to poach him for their CEO role. Nortel learned of this and went into panic mode, promising Clarence a guaranteed fast track to CEO right after John Roth left, and he had been the heir apparent ever since. But now Clarence was leaving too. Years ago, he had suffered a stab wound during an attempted robbery. Although he had taken time off to heal, the old wound was flaring up again, and it was making his job impossible. When Roth learned that his protege wouldn't be able to replace him, he was furious. Getting to sit in the CEO chair at Nortel may have seemed like a dream job in January, but by April, it was a death sentence. Reading outside speculation from the time is fascinating, because all of it was completely off base. The Ottawa Citizen had a list of 6 possible successors, both inside and outside Nortel. But Nortel's board picked someone so out of left field, he didn't even make it into a top 6 consideration. Frank Dunn didn't want to be CEO. He didn't want the spotlight. He and Roth had risen through the ranks of Nortel together. They joined around the same time, both of them attended McGill, and he'd been Roth's CFO during the boom years. But he was hardly an inspiring choice. Even Red Wilson, the chairman of the board who picked him for the job, said that, quote, "The time for visionaries is over." Industry analysts were even harsher on him. He He's not an engineer, and he's not a mastermind of strategy. He's in there to stop the hemorrhaging and make sure the company stays alive to fight another day. When you have a prolonged drought, you want the Neanderthal accountants running the thing, and that's who you've got. His assessment was not wrong. Nortel's books were a mess. With their cash flow decimated in 2001, their strategy of ignoring goodwill no longer fooled investors. It was estimated that nearly 1/3 of their acquisitions were complete write-offs. Some they sold off for rock-bottom prices, but almost $12.4 billion had gone right down the drain. On top of that, it owed around $5 billion in severance, and it had sold off 20,000 square feet of real estate. It had to cancel thousands of customer contracts and was now embroiled in dozens of class action lawsuits. Not to mention, the securities regulators in both the US and Canada were breathing down their neck. WorldCom, one of their biggest customers, had just gone bankrupt due to a fraud scandal. And Frank had a mini crisis unfold just months into his new job. His CFO, Terry Hungle, had been caught illegally transferring funds out of his company 401k right before Nortel announced 5,000 layoffs, and the stock dropped 16%. Insider trading. Hungle was forced to resign, and Dunn now had to pull double duty as both CEO and CFO. He had to personally sign off on Nortel's books as it tried to recover from the brutal downsizing of the last 3 years. Frank seemed almost set up to fail. And yet, by the end of 2002, he had secured several high-profile deals, including $1 billion with Verizon. Despite the deep job losses, Nortel's technical foundation was strong. It was still considered a world leader in optical networks, and its iconic Meridian line of telephone switches remained the world's best seller, with around 43 million in use. Nortel eventually regained the title of Canada's most valuable company, with a market cap of a meager but still impressive $50 billion. And early in 2003, the magic happened. Nortel posted its first profitable quarter since 1997. Despite all those who doubted him, saying that he was nothing more than a Neanderthal accountant, he had brought Nortel back into the green. It's hard to look at this new peak as a recovery when your past history has distorted your sense of scale so much. But this is a win. In February 2004, Chairman Red Wilson will leave a drawing on Frank's desk thanking him for saving the company. And 2 months after that, Red Wilson would fire Frank. The details of what exactly happened would remain murky for years. In October of 2003, Nortel announced it would have to restate its finances for the 3 previous years. Financial restatements are not unheard of. Accountants make mistakes. It happens. But according to the board, this was not just a mistake. Allegedly, Frank, his CFO, and his top accountant had orchestrated a fraud in order to trigger an executive bonus plan. They had allegedly inflated their losses over the past 3 years so that they could move numbers around. By moving the numbers around with just the right timing, they had made Q4 of 2002 into a loss and Q1 of 2003 into a profit, which triggered $12.6 million in bonuses for the 3 of them. The board acted swiftly, firing all 3 men. As you can imagine, this shattered customer faith in Nortel. The stock price began to slide immediately, and the miraculous recovery was just a flash in the pan. The 3 men had become pariahs in the media, a lightning rod for the anger of laid-off employees and pissed-off investors. They'd remain in the media for years as rumors of an impending criminal investigation loomed. The board, meanwhile, was desperate to restore customer trust and hastily named a new CEO. They decided to name one of their own for the top job, but they didn't have a whole wealth of options. Ever since John Roth had left the board, they had been lacking anyone with telecom experience. He had maintained an iron grip on the board for years, and without him, they were lost in the sauce. They had diplomats, former politicians, lawyers, bankers, execs from aerospace and big pharma, but no telecom. The eventual choice, and I'm not kidding here, was former member of the US Joint Chiefs, retired Admiral Bill Owens. Yeah, I don't know how this keeps happening, but this is not the first time I've covered a topic where a retired US Admiral is brought in to save a failing multi-billion-dollar enterprise. I know that I've built up a metaphor here about massive seafaring vessels, but even this is a little too on the nose for me. The logic at the time was that he could leverage his connections in Washington to reel in some big contracts for Nortel, a plan that never truly paid off. Most of his short 18 months as CEO were spent making a big song and dance about how Nortel was instituting new ethics guidelines and forcing executives to pay back any bonuses they had earned in the previous years. Despite all that, he still served as a sponge for angry shareholders to yell at, while the board looked for a more permanent CEO. The rest of the C-suite was a meat grinder, a revolving door of talent that often stuck around for only months at a time. Nortel hired on two separate men named Gary, both of whom came from Cisco to serve as president and CTO. They stayed around for just 3 months. Their shockingly abrupt departure came after Bill Owens shot down their plan for a deal with Nokia, a deal that would allow them to compete in Cisco's territory. Things came to a tense climax when Gary D suggested during a board meeting that Bill Owens and his CFO be fired. Gary D was fired instead, and Gary K joined him in protest. The Garys were outspoken about just how rough Nortel's prospects were. Nortel is an industry laggard, and it doesn't seem to know it. Nortel needed 50 employees to do what Cisco could do with 5. But more dangerously, Nortel was spread out far too broadly. The Garys said that Nortel was either first or second place in a handful of sectors. The problem was that they were competing in nearly 30. Owens was replaced in late 2005 by Mike Zafirovsky, also known as Mike Z, or Mike Z as we say it up here. He seemed much more suited for the role, coming from Motorola. The board must have seen a lot in him, as almost immediately, Motorola sued them for $12 million because Mike had broken his non-compete clause. Mike Z was a certified Six Sigma black belt, a business guru type who was once a protege of Jack Welch, the famous CEO of General Electric and author of the book Winning. From employees I spoke to, there was a general sense that Mike Z was trying to run Nortel like an appliance company. He stuffed the board with his old General Electric buddies and had a philosophy of record and measure everything and then do it faster. Turnaround times were cut down to the bone. You'd have 2 days to fix any given problem, regardless of complexity. Engineers would often derisively say, "We don't make toasters." The whole culture had deteriorated. Your competition was no longer your equivalent at Cisco or Lucent. Now it was the person sitting in the cubicle next to you. Paranoia was rampant. Customer-facing employees were beloved by customers, but those same employees would badmouth their managers or other departments. It's hard to blame them. You would become jaded too after 12 rounds of layoffs. The old Nortel was known for telling customers what they needed, predicting the market 10 years ahead of time. But now it was the customers telling Nortel, "Build us exactly what we want, or we'll find someone else." And while Nortel was missing out on lucrative contracts, board meetings were derailed by problems with Nortel's accounting. Even after firing Frank Dunn, Nortel had restated their finances 3 times in 3 years, and each time their stock price crumbled. Mistakes happen, but not this frequently, and not on this scale. Mike Z estimated around $400 million had been spent just on external auditors. And in 2006, Nortel had to settle 2 class action lawsuits for $2.5 billion. Nortel had spent most of the 2000s shrinking. It was no longer the massive ship it was at the height of the dot-com boom. Every wave in the larger economy risked swamping it. The safest strategy would be to pair up. That's what the rest of the industry had done. Lucent had merged with Alcatel. Nokia had bought out Siemens. And Cisco was back to gobbling down startups. Nortel was willing to buy, it was willing to partner up. Hell, it would even sell its own assets for a bit of fast cash. But Nortel was a toxic commodity, the odd one out of the dance, and its time was up. In September 2008, Lehman Brothers files for bankruptcy, signaling the beginning of what will become the biggest economic crash since the Great Depression. Canada too slides into a recession, with millions losing their jobs, their houses. The demand for telecom equipment drops off a cliff. On January 15, 2009, Mike Z calls a board meeting. Nortel has an upcoming interest payment on its debts. The interest payment is just $107 million. Not that much, considering they had $2.5 billion in cash. Paying it should be no problem, except most of that cash isn't on hand. Most of it is held in international subsidiaries. Only $176 million was in Canada. Suddenly, that interest payment was most of their cash on hand. The board debates what to do for 2 hours before the chairman asked them to take a vote.
June 2007.
Mike Z recalls thinking that the vote would split directly down the middle. He planned to vote against it. When Mike Z joined the company 3 years earlier, he had declared, "I never left anything in worse shape than I found it." But his heart dropped in his chest. He had completely misread the room. Every director had voted yes. Nortel was going to enter into Chapter 11, bankruptcy protection. They would survive the global recession by making cuts, selling assets, becoming more efficient, focused. That was the plan. A plan signed off on by plenty of generously paid external consultants. One of those consultants, Terry Savage, had this to say: "We've never seen a company as well prepared for Chapter 11. His assessment would turn out to be comically wrong. The day after they announced Chapter 11, Nortel's stock fell by 79%. Nortel would be gone by the end of the year.
Well, Steve, company officials are already quoted as saying that Chapter 11 bankruptcy is not the end of Nortel, but rather the beginning of a new Nortel.
Sound like a dream come true? Well, it's reality. And it can help your business.
In hindsight, the decision to go into Chapter 11 is baffling no matter how you spin it. Unlike filing for Chapter 7, where you basically give up and liquidate all your assets, Chapter 11 is more like going into rehab. Your debt payments are halted, and any disputes are now under the jurisdiction of bankruptcy court. Things are bad, but you have a chance to sell off your assets, restructure, and get your shit together. Plenty of companies have gone into Chapter 11 and come out the other side just fine, including well-known names like General Motors, Marvel, and Six Flags. The issue with this strategy was that, like unlike these other companies, Nortel had an image problem. Nortel's credit rating had already been an abysmal CCC, and Chapter 11 had tanked it all the way down to D. Their biggest customers, like Bell Canada and Verizon, were already wary of Nortel's finance scandals. From a technology standpoint, Nortel could pull off 3G wireless, but this was a decade-long infrastructure commitment. Would it not be safer to just go with a company who isn't in Chapter 11? That was the last excuse they needed to jump ship. In the second quarter of 2009, Nortel's sales dropped by 25% compared to the previous year. Even Nortel's cash cow, its wireless division, had its revenues for the quarter dropped by 41% compared to the previous year. The announcement took many people by complete surprise. My uncle worked for Nortel at the time, and he heard the news from a customer at a conference. It's clear looking back at the time that many expected Nortel to pull through. The disconnect is jarring. You'd be reading the newspaper and see ads for a local cancer charity sponsored by Nortel, directly across from an article talking about just how badly the restructuring was going. Meanwhile, Nortel has been trying to sell off its various divisions, but there hasn't been a single bid. Mike Zed is on the phone, personally calling dozens of potential buyers, but no one is biting. He realizes with a sinking feeling what's happening. They're waiting for the prices to drop even further. By April, the board realizes that they completely miscalculated. There will be no emerging from Chapter 11. Without a bailout, Nortel is going to be hacked into pieces and sold off for scraps. Now, Nortel's board had plenty of connections in politics. This included former Deputy PM John Manley. However, the government was no longer the familiar Liberal dynasty. After 13 long years, the fallout of scandal after scandal continued to drag down Paul Martin, and he was eventually ousted in 2006 by a newly unified Conservative Party. In power in Ottawa was a new party, with which Nortel had fewer connections. It was uncharted waters. It would come out in the news that late last year, Mike Zed had gone to the Conservatives and asked for a bailout. $1 billion. The Conservatives, although certainly pals of the private sector, found the request laughable. Mike Zed tried to counter-offer with $750 million, but again, he was turned down. The rumors from this time seem to point to the government's lack of faith in Nortel's executives, that Nortel was a toxic commodity in the eyes of the public. They lacked a clear business plan, and bailing out a company with an ongoing fraud investigation was not worth the bad optics. Government inaction towards Nortel did not fly under the radar.
Industry Minister and the Prime Minister in a bid to maintain the company as a going concern. He was turned down flat, and the company is now in bankruptcy protection, waiting to be dismantled. Thousands of trained, skilled workers have lost their jobs, their severance, and they're going to lose big on their pensions. Why are the Conservatives intent on making Nortel the Arrow of the 21st century?
The Honourable Minister of Industry.
Speaker, quite apart from that inflated rhetoric, I can tell this House that I did indeed meet with the CEO of Nortel at the beginning of my mandate as Industry Minister. He presented a go-forward business plan, which in my estimation did not meet the criteria of being commercially viable. Evidently, the board of Nortel came to the same agreement because they rejected that business plan as well.
Look, I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of government bailouts for private corporations, and even among the Nortel employees I spoke to, opinion was split. But many of them did highlight a double standard. It wasn't that the Conservatives were philosophically opposed to a government bailout, They, along with the Ontario Liberals, had shelled out $13.7 billion to both General Motors and Chrysler, literal US branch plants. Although the government took partial ownership of both companies, they later sold those shares at a significant loss. There was a pervasive feeling among those I spoke to that auto workers, mainly concentrated in the suburbs of the Greater Toronto Area, represented a more valuable voting bloc than a bunch of tech workers. With no bailout on the horizon, some former Nortel executives tried to take matters into their own hands. Rather than see Nortel sold off piece by piece to foreign competitors, they scrambled to raise enough funds to keep at least a few of the assets in the country. But as the months wore on, investors kept getting cold feet. In June, BlackBerry, another Canadian tech giant, publicly complains that Nortel blocked their bid for their wireless division. Even if it didn't go to them, they pled with the government to invoke the Investment Canada Act to block a foreign takeover. This wasn't unprecedented. Harper's Tories had actually used it just a year earlier when a US defense firm attempted to purchase MDA, a Canadian aerospace company, famous for its contributions to the Canadarm. Between 1985 and 2010, the Investment Canada Act had reviewed 1,600 takeovers. This was the first time it had ever blocked one. Although the government declined to give an official reason, most analysts agree it was for national defense reasons, as Canada would have potentially lost access to the satellite RadarSat-2, which had been funded through nearly $500 million in government funding. Following this example, the government could easily have made whatever excuse it wanted to block the Nortel sell-off. National security, loss of taxpayer-funded research, but they simply never did. On June 26th, Nortel's shares dropped to 18.5 cents, causing them to finally be delisted from the Toronto Stock Exchange. It's over. In July, Swedish giant Ericsson takes home the cash cow, Nortel's wireless division. A steal at just over $1 billion, they take 2,500 employees with it. Sienna, based out of Maryland, swoops in and acquires Nortel's world-leading optical division, the one that made 10 gigabits per second possible before anyone else. It goes for $750 million, taking on almost 2,000 employees. And then, the thing that put Nortel on the map, the phone division, sold off to Avaya. Ironically, the same company that Nortel had tried to buy just a few years earlier. But most bidders had been patiently waiting for the biggest prize of all, a collection of nearly 6,000 patents, a decades-long history of innovation in voice, wireless, semiconductors, and the internet. Mike Zed estimated that they'd get around $450 million for them. The winning bid went to a consortium of Apple, EMC, Ericsson, Microsoft, Sony, and BlackBerry. When the size of the bid was announced, the entire industry was floored. $4.5 billion. Mike Zed truly had no idea what he'd been put in charge of. And that was it. The yard sale was over. By 2011, Nortel had a pile of $7.3 billion in cash, but total debts.
Oh, hey, I'll see you around and choose. Have a good night. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow.
Of $12 billion.
Thanks for hanging out. I'm sorry that the job hunt took so long, and I'm just wrapping it up now.
Yeah. No one would see that money for years. Just days after the bankruptcy filing, it would be uncovered by the media that Nortel was not planning on paying severance to thousands of employees it was about to lay off. Under Canadian bankruptcy law, a company is no longer required to pay out severance. However, as noted by the courts, Nortel was asked whether it wanted to prioritize severed workers in the bankruptcy proceeding. Nortel's executives explicitly said no, and in fact, getting out of paying severance had been one of their key strategies for restructuring the company. The dark irony is that if you had been fired just weeks earlier, you would have been owed severance, but those who stuck with Nortel to the bitter end were rewarded with a giant middle finger. Think about what's going on at this time. It was 2009, it was a global recession. These people weren't going to land on their feet because no one was hiring. And these were just the people at the prime of their careers. For the retired or soon-to-be retired workers, they had no options at all. It was revealed that Nortel had been severely underfunding its pension plan for pretty much the last decade, by almost 30%. Just so we're on the same page here, a pension is made up of deferred wages. It is not a bonus, it is not an insurance plan. People often stay in the same job for decades because they plan their retirement around their company's pension plan. They took a pay cut in the present so they would have a sustainable income once they're too old to work. If your pension is underfunded, you've lost years of your working life that you can't get back. The average age of a Nortel pensioner was 73, and the average annual payout was just 17,000 Canadian. These were not luxurious nest eggs by any means, certainly not when compared to the golden parachutes that Nortel's executives were raking in. Right after they fired 3,200 people, they immediately turned around and began to offer $45 million in bonuses in order to retain what they called key talent, 980 employees, or just 5% of its workforce. And the bonuses just kept coming, round after round. All in all, nearly $190 million in executive bonuses were paid out post-bankruptcy. Underfunded pension plans are certainly not unique to Nortel, but the cruelty here is the executives saying, sorry, our hands are tied. Take it up with the courts. All the while, they're patting themselves on the back with the same pile of money that those pensioners are desperately trying to save. Both Mike Zed and John Roth would later file claims to Nortel's assets, $12 million for Mike, and for John Roth, this is not a typo, $1 billion in the event he got sued. Unlike the US or the UK, which have nationally backed pension guarantees, Canada has no such thing. The feds and the provinces played the blame game for over a year, with the feds saying, hey, it's not our jurisdiction, and the provinces saying, we got no money. Only Ontario stepped up, but that was after a full year of inaction and only after a by-election was called for the Ottawa riding where thousands of Nortel pensioners lived. There was a consistent feeling among the employees that they had been abandoned by their governments, that they were only deserving of help if they represented a useful voting demographic. Thousands showed up at protests held outside Parliament. Among those protesters were 400 who had also lost their long-term disability benefits. On average, their income would drop from around $40,000 to just $16,000 per year, and they still had to pay for their medical bills. Quote, I'm sick, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. I can't take care of myself because I'm trying to save my life. I stand to live in my car if nothing's done. There's people in this group of 400 who have already committed suicide. There's people that have talked about it. People are desperate, and we need the government to go to bat for us. On June 18th, Mike Zed is dragged in front of the House Finance Committee for questioning. Members from all parties grill him for over an hour, and he absolutely melts under the questions.
You just stated in your opening comments that you stopped to pay severance, and it was just, how did you come to that conclusion? How did you just all of a sudden realize, well, maybe we should stop paying severance?
I fully agree with that statement, Mr. Take, and
Hey, Noob Fever, I was making sure the mic was on. Just got done doing the job hunting. I just got done applying to 3 different jobs, and I was kind of watching this. I feel like I need to take a nap. I'm starting to feel like I need to take a nap, and then I'll come back in like an hour or two. I'll be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I'm just kind of listless. Or I could just keep the live stream going. Ooh. You need a nap too. Yeah. No, I've been doing good. I think I really I should listen to myself. I should listen to my body. I hate for you to just say hi and then for me to be like, oh, I'm in the stream, but I'm thinking about it, and like I hope you're around in 2 or 3 hours. Yeah, man, just let me get some shut eye. Let me get a REM cycle or 2 in. I'm sure I'm getting old. You know, I'm over 40 now, so I'm allowed to take a nap. But I hope to see you online. I'm gonna set my alarm for like 3 hours. So maybe I'll wake up before then, but I'm gonna set the alarm for 3 hours. And I'm going to get a little shut-eye. And then hopefully I get to see you in the live stream tonight, because we're going to work more on that video essay. I think one of the things that might help me find a job is to list my video production company as like a side hobby on my LinkedIn profile. But if I do that, I want to be able to point to something that like shows my project management skills and stuff. And that's what this this video is going to do, at least the video script that I have next. Just advocating for or educating folks and talking about like a new way of doing things, you know. The way that, you know, some games companies are still making things, it's like, you know, you should probably get feedback from people before you get the thing 80% of the way built, you know. You should probably change the change the dynamic there, and then that way, if you went down the wrong path, you didn't go 80% down the wrong path before figuring out you needed to turn around. So, oh yeah, oh that's right, it's super late where you're at. Okay, well if not, you get some sleep, man. Yeah, I'm gonna go get horizontal for a little bit. Let me just do something real quick. Oh no, I need to do that too. Okay, let's move this over here. I set myself a reminder yesterday and I didn't get to it. It's something to do with my LLC. All right, so that's 1, 2, 3. All right, let's just move all this stuff down here. Okay, so we basically looked for jobs for that long. I'm just updating my calendar. Okay, and that's going to be 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Yep, that's 3 hours. Okay, nap time. Okay, so I should be back by 8:30 tops. 8:30 my time anyway. I'm not... That's going to be late your time. All right. Pause, reset. Okay, yeah. I think... yeah, because I still need to exercise and everything. I'm like, is taking a nap the right idea? What if I end up being... I can't worry about stuff like this. I just, all I know is that I'm tired and I need to rest. So let me do that, and I'll worry about everything else later. That's the other thing I hate about getting tired. It affects my judgment. I'm like, is this the right thing to do? Should I be doing it? Should I just stay up for another 2 or 3 hours and then go to bed early? Should I get a nap? Like, I don't know, but I think a nap. So I'll shut up. I'll see you in a little bit, hopefully. Later.